Hello and welcome to SpyHards podcast, where your hosts go deep undercover into the world of spy movies to decipher which films make the knock list. But remember, this information is strictly for your ears only. I am Agent Scott.
And I'm Cam the Provocateur, and Scott, the dead are alive.
I have so many questions about that opening line and
the
how it
dead
ties into the film.
Are alive.
Oh, sorry, you have to shout it like the film does at you. But we're already alluding to the film, and we haven't introduced our guest. Joining us in this hurricane, as we are all kites dancing in it, it is two gents joining us here on the show from FilmSpeak, which I think is a wonderful YouTube channel, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But we have Griff and Brody. Hello, sirs. How are you?
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having us. Really stoked to talk about Spectre, because I think we may be two of the only people out there that will go to bat for this film. So,
we may need this. We may need this inspiration here. When we get to it. But maybe before we dive into the fourth Daniel Craig film a little bit, let's talk about yourselves. Now, I mentioned FilmSpeak, and you've got some wonderful video essays on. Your one on Tomorrow Never Dies is probably one of my favorites, because I think that's one of the best Bond films there was ever created. I will stand by that film forever.
My man, yes, absolutely. I'm there with you. Yes.
But what inspired you to want to talk about James Bond? And maybe tell us a little bit each about your love of Bond and maybe spy films as well. Let's start with you, Griffin.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was, I don't know, I think it was like a gradual thing. Like, it wasn't like an immediate, oh, Bond is my favorite film franchise of all time. It was more of just like, I found myself gravitating towards those movies, growing up. Whether it was mostly like, the Sean Connery films, like Dr. No, From Russia with Love, stuff like that. And then through that, it kind of went into the Daniel Craig era, because I was born in 95, so I caught the tail end of Brosnan, but I didn't really I feel like I found those films a bit later. I was actually more interested in the video games with Bond, like Tomorrow Never Dies. That video game was pretty influential on just my love of the franchise, which is weird because I know a lot of people are usually like, oh, GoldenEye, that was the thing that got me into Bond, and that wasn't necessarily the case for me. The film though, I think that really hooked me was Casino Royale, because that came out around the time when I was a teen, or maybe a tween. I guess I was in middle school or something like that. And I just remember watching that movie, and just that film just left such a massive impression, and sort of changed my life in a way, because I was just I fucking love movies, and I want to keep, I want to just do something with film in some capacity. So yeah, Casino Royale played a big part in not only my love of the medium, of the film medium, but just of of Bond as well. It was Batman Begins, Peter Jackson's King Kong, and then Casino Royale. Those are the three big movies that had that left a big impression on me. And then so from there, I just kind of fell in love with the character, and specifically Daniel Craig's interpretation of it. And through each of his films, I get something out of all of them. Even, I have a video defending Quantum of Solace. I mean, that was one that took a lot out of both of us in order to kind of put together, because it is so divisive, I guess, among fans. But that was a movie that I saw in theaters. I was excited to see it, saw it, loved it, didn't get the hate, played the video games, all that stuff. So it was, it was just a big part of my life. And then it just became an even bigger part of it as I got older, and just was able to, actually dissect these big popcorn films as pieces of art and figure out what they were trying to say. And then, going back to the earlier films and discovering those, and figuring out what those movies were saying about the time periods that they existed in. And so it's just a fun franchise, and with a lot to offer outside of just the martinis, girls, cars. Also, that was never the thing that hooked me on Bond. It was the character. It was what the emotions of it all, and just I guess the Fleming of it all, if you will.
Sure. No, and that Quantum of Solace video, I think, is a good partnership with our review, because I think we're both quite defenders of that film, along with David Zaritsky, another champion of that film on YouTube. So you're in the same sort of group there on YouTube, which is nice. But Brody, what about you? Your sort of love for Bond and also your love for these films?
Yeah, I kind of came about it a little more aggressively, I guess. It was sort of like I mean, I'm the same age as Griffin, and but I think I caught the tail end of Brosnan a little earlier, because I remember seeing The World Is Not Enough. That was the first one I saw. I remember seeing that on TV right before, I guess, the Die Another Day came out. And I mean, I was a kid. I didn't really fully comprehend what I was seeing, but I just remember being like, oh, like the man jumps out the window, and like that's cool, and I want to see more of that. And from there, it just sort of developed into this. I mean, like I went in like maybe middle school into high school. I was like laser focused, like super into this. Became the thing that like people would know. Oh yeah, if you want to know something about Bond, like this guy knows like what to sort of say, what the answer to your question is. And that was sort of my initial, like, I just went in really hard with it. And then, yeah, I didn't end up seeing one in theaters until I saw Quantum of Solace, which was kind of because I saw Casino Royale at home, but my parents were like, yeah, we're not going to go take you to see this, violent movie. We'll watch it at home, which I guess was, I didn't see the difference, but like whatever.
Somehow it's safer, apparently.
Somehow, yeah, I guess they can.
Well, they just didn't
switch it off.
They didn't want you to see Daniel Craig get his balls whipped on a massive freaking screen. They were just like, no. Maybe you won't be able to see it if it's at home on the television.
Yeah,
right?
I think maybe because I remember that being like there was a big like kind of hysteria about that when it came out. They were like, oh my god, this torture scene is quite intense. But like, I remember that being like one of the big sort of reactions to it. So we didn't see that, and I was old enough by Quantum of Solace that I could say, I'm going by myself. And so and after that, I was sort of really into it. I mean, before I'd seen Quantum, I had been reading the books because that was sort of my outlet. I was like, oh yeah, I want to get into these since I can't go and see these in theaters. And so in a similar like vein to Griffin, I think the character is what has really been the most resonant thing for me. I don't know. I think there's something quite compelling about how he isn't a great guy. Like I think, like in James, especially in the books, James Bond in the books is very complicated, a very sort of his time character, and obviously that's been adapted in the films, and he's sort of came to suit whatever time period he finds himself in. But at the core of it, there is this sort of darkness to him that as an adolescent boy, I was like, that really speaks to me for some reason. I like the idea that this man can have all these sort of imperfections and yet still be in the end a force for good in some way, even if that means pushing against the forces that be above him. And so I don't know, I found that really compelling about the character. And then by the time I was old enough to understand, my media literacy had sort of improved. I was like, this is my bag now. I guess I'm just into Bond, and I mean, and it's sort of broadened out into other. I love espionage in general. I love spy fiction, and so it sort of spurred this lifelong passion. I have other interests, obviously, but Bond's always the thing I come back to. So it's a comfort thing.
I have a question for both of you.
Yeah.
Now, you've said, like, you're defenders of Quantum of Solace. You've hinted that you have some positive things to say about Spectre, two fairly polarizing Bond films. I'm curious, though, when you look at the past of Bond, if you have any hot takes, whether positive or negative, about previous eras or particular films.
I think my hottest take is that, and I don't know if this is necessarily a hot take anymore. I think people have kind of come around on it. I think Moonraker might be maybe not the best Roger Moore film, because I think For Your Eyes Only takes the cake there. But like Moonraker is a better version of what Lewis Gilbert was trying to do with The Spy Who Loved Me.
Interesting.
I don't know. It just kind of like works for me. I don't look. I have a whole video talking about that too. So like it's I don't know. And that was something that I didn't really come to until like a couple of years ago when I actually sat down to rewatch Moonraker. I think I had let the the zeitgeist kind of like get into my head, and it's like, oh, Moonraker, it's stupid, it's Bond goes to space, whatever. But I just remember watching it, and I'm like, no, there's a lot going on here that's like interesting. You know, obviously double taking pigeons aside and stupid stuff like that, but it
stupid.
I don't know, all of the
genius.
Genius, yeah. That gondola chase, I can't defend that. That's terrible. But I don't know. That is I guess that is a pretty hot take. I don't know.
What about you, Brody?
Well, it's going to be another Roger Moore one, I guess. I think it's easiest to have a controversial opinion about Roger Moore because he is, I think, as time goes on, quite divisive. Unfortunately, because I think he brings something that we're probably never going to get again. So,
that's true.
But I think, I want to go on the record. I do not stand by Griffin's horrendous opinion that Moonraker is better than The Spy Who Loved Me.
Yeah, I wrote that one by myself. That was that. He did not help me with that. That was all shocking. Me. That was all me.
Yeah, that's. I like Moonraker, but I'm not going to go that far. I think, and this is actually another one that I think has become more mainstream. But I quite like. I've always liked Octopussy. I think Octopussy is. It's not.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a perfect movie. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's like, you know, Citizen Kane or whatever. But I think as a little as a blend of what Roger Moore was good at as Bond and what is interesting about Bond as like a literary character, I think it kind of meets nicely in the middle. There is like a nice synergy of goofy and, you know, actual spy intrigue that I think none of his other films really ever tap into, because you're either on the other side of it with Moonraker, or For Your Eyes Only, I think, is a good film, but I think it also is leaning as far away from what Roger Moore is good at as possible, or at least what I appreciate about Roger Moore. So, you know, it's kind of hard to say, oh, that's, you know, a perfect Roger Moore film, because it's really not a Roger Moore film. It kind of works in spite of him, I think, anyway. But yeah, Octopussy, I'll go to bat for Octopussy. Why not?
Yeah, I don't get that.
That was a real favorite in my house growing up. So, yeah, both myself and my sister can somewhat side with you on that one.
That's the thing. I used to watch that one all the time. Sorry, you go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I was genuinely worried your hot take was going to be something like, A View to a Kill is the best Bond film of all time. We'd have to throw you out. I can't take that on this show.
I do like A View to a Kill as well. Maybe that in and of itself is a hot take. Yeah.
Max Zorin and Mayday, they keep the thing going. That's really...
They do?
They do. Everything else in that film is actively resisting being good, and they are just there pushing.
Yeah.
I mean, the stunts are pretty good too. I'll leave it at
that. you got John Glenn. You're not going to miss when it comes to stunts. That is for sure. But I get it with the Octopussy argument, and it does get sort of seven-time type. It's actually a very good spy thriller in its own sense. From our point of view, we haven't covered Octopussy yet, but from that perspective, it is quite an interesting film to talk about. Yeah, the death of, I think, is it 006?
8?
006? Yeah.
No, it's not 006. It's 009.
009, yeah.
Both of us are wrong. 009. Which features again in this film, actually.
They should have went with 008, you know, the 8 tentacles.
Yeah, that's a missed opportunity right there.
Yeah, there we go. Well, I think that cues us up beautifully with 009 to talk about this week's film. Cameron, I'll throw it to you. We've already said it, but what are we talking about this week?
Yeah, we're tackling 2015's Spectre, the 4th Daniel Craig Bond entry.
It's an interesting one because I bathed Skyfall in praise. I gave it a very long hot bath. I have a lot to say about Spectre, which I'll get to. But I suppose the question I have for everyone before I read the letterboxd.com synopsis for those who aren't aware of it. When Spectre came out, what was everyone's sort of thoughts on it? I myself was quite lukewarm on it. I was quite excited going in because I was a big wrestling fan at the time. You got Bautista in there, and he's actually one of my highlights of the film. And again, I'll touch on that later. But it just didn't have the same energy for me that Skyfall did. And I never really revisited it again until No Time to Die came out, and I watched it one more time as like a primer. So until today, I'd only ever seen it twice.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow. Damn.
But go with Brody. What about you?
I have such a complicated relationship with this movie. But when I first saw it, I was really into it, actually. I think I don't I didn't like it as much as Skyfall.
Did we see it together? Because I know this was like when we were starting like the YouTube and the podcast and all this stuff like that. So we may have seen this movie together. I can't remember.
I didn't see it at first with you. I went up to Chicago and I saw it in the IMAX.
Okay, so that's what. All right,
like Navy Pier, and I was hyped up because I mean I obviously Skyfall had really given everyone this huge boost, and I went in like I think immediately before I went into the movie, the reviews dropped, and people were like, "Ooh, this is not great," and so I sort of had that in the back of my mind as I started watching the movie. I'm like, okay, well, I know people aren't, digging this one as much, and honestly, I can see exactly why people don't like it. I will not stand here and tell you you're wrong because I get it. I just, for some reason, I vibe with it. It for some reason, I connect with it. And that makes me more willing to sort of overlook its flaws. And that was consistent from the very first go of it. I went through like a stint where I really sort of turned against it, and I've sort of softened up on it again. So it's a bit of a curve there, but that's my journey.
A roller coaster ride. A
little bit, yeah. Probably more exciting than the movie itself, but
no comment just yet. Griffin, what about you? Obviously, you didn't get to see it with Brody in person by the sounds of it the first time, but yeah, what did you think of Spectre when you first saw it?
Yeah, I don't know. I know that my initial reaction was like I was like floored by the one take at the beginning. That's all I could talk. I mean, I guess that is really all anyone ever really talks about with that film. But yeah, I was just like, holy shit, how did they pull that off? Like that's next level stuff. And then it led to 1917, which God bless, love that movie. Yeah, I if I'm being honest, and I don't know if I necessarily remember how I felt. I know I liked it, but obviously it wasn't better than Skyfall. It wasn't better than Casino Royale. I think I was like comparing it to how I felt about Quantum at the time, but I just had such affinity for Quantum. So like, I think even then when I saw it, it was my least favorite of the Craig movies, but I really liked the atmosphere of it all. This might be controversial. I actually really, really like Hoyt van Hoytema's cinematography, and the color palettes. Like I think, well, we'll get into that later on, but yeah, I liked it. I thought it was like a solid outing. Obviously some issues with story and like the scripting and structure and like, subplots not really linking up where they should be. Some rushed like relationships, the romance specifically. I know initially when I saw it, I was like, oh wow, that was like really rushed. I've kind of softened on that a little bit. So yeah, my journey with the film certainly isn't as interesting as Brody's has been. Like I've seen pages upon pages of analysis from him, like just dissecting Spectre. It's insane, like the lengths that he's gone to.
Every time I watch it, I send Griffin like paragraphs. I'm like, hey, did you notice this about Spectre? And it's like it's actually psychotic, but
yeah, no, it's wild. Like
we know what your next Bond video is on FilmSpeak now.
Honestly, we've been talking about it.
Well, it is. It's yeah. I mean, that's a video that's been years in the making. Good God. But yeah, no, I think it's a fine movie that's actually made better by No Time to Die, and I think it's pretty easy for Spectre to become the punching bag, and like it makes sense because it was the last Bond film for like a 5-year gap until No Time to Die, so everyone was going back to it. It was the most recent one. They were digging too deep into it, and they were like nitpicking the shit out of it. And it's like, I get it. It was the punching bag, and it's because of that lull, that gap. I don't know if it'll ever really get out of there. Maybe there will be some like retrospective sort of like reappraisal of the whole thing, but like what's happening with Quantum. But I don't know. It's fine. It's not the worst thing in the world.
You never know. Maybe that's what we start here. Maybe the line is drawn this week.
Hey, there we go.
You never know. You never know. Cam, you haven't told us. What did you think of Spectre at the time?
Yeah. So for me, I know a lot of people walked out of this movie pretty hostile towards it because of this absolute adoration for Skyfall. And I didn't have that same adoration for Skyfall. Like, I liked Skyfall. I thought it was a very good movie. But I did not walk out of it going, classic. Top tier, Bond doesn't get better than Skyfall. And so I remember going to Spectre and being like, yeah, that one was also good. I enjoyed that as well, just as I enjoyed Skyfall. And there was definitely elements that bothered me about it. Perhaps a brother twist we'll talk about later. I remember just like fighting with that in my head, trying to make sense of it. But in terms of like the overall journey, the action scenes, the kind of collecting of breadcrumbs along the trail, connecting everything together, I was like, oh, no, that was entertaining. It's hard to like walk out of a Bond movie, even a modern one, and say like, I didn't like it because the plot was convoluted. Because then it's like, you got to go through the history of the franchise and be like, wait, License to Kill, Octopussy, Diamonds Are Forever. I guess I don't like those either because they're all convoluted. So I don't really hold that against the movie. It was more about like the energy, the vibe, just Sam Mendes' direction. I was like, no, that was an entertaining package. It's got some issues, but I did walk out pretty happy, and I did see it twice in theaters as well, which I did not do with Skyfall. Skyfall, I only saw the once.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
I don't know why.
I thought I was going into like familiar territory. I thought people will be on where perhaps I'm coming from with this film, but it really seems like we may have a mixed bunch here, which I think may lead into an interesting conversation. But for those who haven't seen Spectre, and I don't know why you've clicked play on this episode if you haven't seen Spectre, but there you are, and we love you all the same. Here is your Letterboxd.com synopsis. Spectre, a plan no one escapes. A cryptic message from Bond's past sends him on a trail to uncover a sinister organization. While M battles political forces to keep the Secret Services alive, Bond peels back the layers of deceit to reveal the terrible truth behind Spectre.
Dun dun dun.
Dun, dun,
It is a terrible truth.
Yeah, that was a serviceable synopsis there, but I guess that's the film.
Yeah, in a nutshell. Yeah, that's it. All right, this has been great, guys. We should do it again sometime.
Yeah.
Thanks, Letterboxd.
Yeah. But before we get to the behind the scenes on Spectre, I do just want to let you know, folks, we do have some wonderful Spy Master interviews coming for you next week. Not only do we have the one and only Mr. Gary Powell, stunt coordinator extraordinaire, but we also have the lead costume designer for both this film and Skyfall, Miss Janny, to me, but we'll tell you more about that at the end of the show. Well, Cam, it's interesting because we'll have a lot to chart, I think, when we go from Spectre to No Time to Die. But it is a 3-year jump between Skyfall to Spectre. And what happened in between?
Yeah, okay, so the story of Spectre is one that I feel isn't fully told yet. I think like one day there's going to be a book written or something about the making of Spectre that's going to be so much more detailed than what truly is out there now, even though a lot is out there.
Than this episode, so you can click off now. There's nothing here for you.
Well, when you watch that, that Bond documentary that Daniel Craig did, looking back at his career as Bond, when they got to like Quantum, they're like, oh, that was a tough one. We struggled with the script. And then they just glossed right over Spectre. They weren't quite ready to talk about Spectre yet.
They really did.
Those Sony leaks, man.
That's where a lot of the information comes from. But
Yeah.
So the ball got rolling on Spectre actually during production of Skyfall, where writer John Logan, who had worked on Skyfall, just started putting together notes on the film. And John Logan was a playwright and screenwriter who'd worked on movies like Gladiator, The Aviator, Rango. And they didn't... The issue with like Spectre was, I don't know if there was a great sense of what they wanted to do next, because it seems like it got a little kind of like hammered together over time. Now, initially after Skyfall, Sam Mendes was out. He was done, I think just exhausted from making the movie and couldn't really imagine jumping into another one. Now, apparently Eon wanted him back really bad, but they did meet with apparently Nicholas Winding Refn, who'd worked on Drive. He turned them down, and they just decided they were better off to wait for Sam Mendes. He went off and did a co-direction of a National Theatre production of King Lear, and then agreed to come back. And one of the things that kind of got him excited about coming back was he wanted to have a more proactive Bond. He wanted more locations, more of a tonal variety. And Eon agreed with this and were on board. He also really wanted like a duality concept going, like hot and cold, day and night, love and hate, life and death. And so like when it came to like locations, he wanted a hot location and a cold location. He wanted this like thread of dichotomies to run through the course of the film. And I guess the question is, did any of you pick up on that when you're watching the movie?
Well,
I was certainly cold at some points.
Yeah. The life and death.
Yeah,
the life and death for sure. Yeah, past and present.
Yeah, at one point verbally they do mention it, so I was like, okay.
Yeah,
the dead are alive. They're simultaneously.
They are. Yes, they are.
I feel like that opening quote might be like a vestigial tale of what the original like concept was for the themes of the movie, but apparently like Sam Mendes and John Logan really wanted to use Spectre and Blofeld, and Eon was basically like, okay, those rights aren't settled, but go ahead and we'll figure it out. And so while they worked on the screenplay, they settled all those age-old problems that go back to our Thunderball episode, our Never Say Never Again episode. There has been many decades of issues with Blofeld and what have you in those rights. So the first script that John Logan wrote was called The Death Collector, and it had elements like the Day of the Dead sequence that opens this movie. It did end, though, with a car chase versus a helicopter battle.
Okay, I'd say that's probably an improvement that we had then.
Yes, yeah. Well, debatably. We'll see when we get to the actual review.
Oh,
but,
wow, this is just going to be me and Cam fighting the whole episode. You guys are going to be like referees.
Yeah, split it up, guys. Come on.
I'm not saying one way or the other.
I wonder if that car chase was then put in later, like the Lamborghini chase, like in Rome.
Yeah, that's my guess. Yeah. So this is where the Sony hack comes into play, because a lot of this information probably would have been lost to time. If you go through the Bond archives book, which I always do when I'm putting together notes, it glosses over a lot of what went into making the story of Spectre. And so thanks to the Sony hack, which was perpetrated by hackers, it seems, from North Korea. It's never been 100% confirmed, but seems to be the case.
They were unhappy with their representation and Die Another Day.
I was literally about to say that.
Home run.
Yes.
Yeah, where they leaked all these inner office memos from Sony and scripts and all that sort of stuff. And a lot of movies were affected by this. I think the Amazing Spider-Man franchise. There was a whole bunch of stuff, but the Spectre film it fell victim to this, where an early draft of the screenplay hit the internet, as well as a lot of inner office notes, and it became very clear there was a lot of friction between Sony and Eon over this movie. Sony was not happy with the script. They did not like where the story was going. They referred to it as a mess. There was a lot of fighting over production costs, about how much this movie was going to cost, and also like, because of just the issues with figuring out the storyline, Sam Mendes was basically on the fence and considering walking. And so it was at this point that like the producers brought in Neil Purvis and Robert Wade basically to save the film. They were actually going to kind of leave the franchise after Skyfall, but it was very much you have to get back here and save this film because what we have is not working and we have a deadline coming up.
Okay. Now, I had heard of this Sony hack, but I don't know much about, what's the leak, I should say. I don't know much about what else was out there, but is all this information public now and you can go sift through it if you want to?
You can, yeah, because there was other details that were also revealed, like Irma Bunt was going to be a character in the story that was cut. There was also flirtations with making Blofeld an African warlord or dictator.
Yeah.
And Chiwetel Ejiofor was linked with the role. This was widely reported at the time.
Yeah.
And that just obviously never wound up being the case in the film. And they did actually consider Ejiofor for the C role, but just decided he was too expensive for that particular role. And so that's how they got Andrew Scott. They also apparently considered making this movie a 2-film deal, kind of like a Harry Potter / Hunger Games thing, where the story was getting so big that it would require 2 films to tell.
Oh God, I could just hear Twitter exploding now. It's reverberating through time from 2015. They just don't like this concept. No, I don't think that would have sold very well.
I can guarantee if this had been a 2-film deal, Daniel Craig would not have come back for a No Time to Die.
Yes, he would have actually slashed his wrists. That's what actually would have happened. Yeah.
Would it have been just like Spectre Part 1? Is that what they would have called it? Can you imagine a Bond film having a Part 1?
I remember like I think very early on they were like, okay, the Craig era is going to end with like a 2-parter. It's going to be like the 4th film and the 5th film. They're both going to be their own sort of movies, but there's going to be like connective tissue that that allows it to kind of like finish his arc, which I guess in a weird sense is kind of what they did, because No Time to Die is like
that idea.
They did hang on, and they made it. I mean, to their credit, at least in my opinion, I think they made it work. But yeah, that is so weird. Like, I can't picture like a part 1, part 2 deal, like only half the story. Like that's not a Bond thing. Even if the films are linked in some capacity, they need to be able to stand on their own as individual stories, you know?
It's so much, though, this franchise is always jumping on trends.
Yeah,
and
right.
There's trends that are alive and well in Spectre that were popular at the time. And it's almost like they would have been on point to adopt this whole 2-film thing because so many other franchises were doing it at that point.
Yeah.
But I am glad it did not happen.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And so when Purvis and Wade came in, they delivered their first draft after 3 months, and they titled the film Spectre. So they were the ones that officially set the title and introduced the Snowden-inspired Nine Eyes story with Andrew Scott and Surveillance and all that sort of stuff. They also decided on the surprise leader being Blofeld, overseeing this entire operation. They also came up with the idea of making M a villain, to which Ray Fiennes said, "Nope, not happening." And they were like, "Oh, okay. Well, what about Tanner?" And that didn't fly either. And so that's how we wound up with C being created, was because Ray Fiennes was like, "Get the hell out of here with that."
Yeah.
What does C stand for? Change of plans.
Change of plans. I kind of would have liked M being the bad guy. I think that would have... I mean, maybe it was too soon with his M to really have any resonance, but I like the concept of it. I'm sure they'll come back to that eventually, but as they usually do.
Well, see, he kind of is. He kind of is the bad guy in No Time to... I mean, not the bad guy, but like he is an antagonistic force in No Time to Die. So like, I think you did need Spectre and like Bond coming to have that respect for Mallory. I mean, I guess that kind of happens at the end of Skyfall, and now it's a bit more of a working relationship. You get more of like the father-son dynamic as opposed to like the mother-son dynamic from the Judy Craig sort of thing. So I like how they work that out, and so that by the end of Spectre, it's like, okay, no, Mallory's really like, I feel like I can let go of my apprehensions about him because we were able to work through this together, and he was able to trust me as an agent with instincts. So yeah, that's I don't hate the M being a villain idea either, but yeah, they definitely needed like a middle chapter, like a regular chapter with Mallory before they even kind of dipped their toes into that kind of thing.
It would feel, I think, a little more like, say, a frustrating example of the jump from Quantum to Skyfall, where it's like, Bond, you're a young agent, to Bond, you're old. Yeah, and we kind of let that one go. But I think like the jump from Mallory being introduced as the new M to Mallory being a villain would just be like a little too much of a whiplash situation.
It would like undo that final scene in Skyfall where it's like they have that mutual respect. They come together, and he's like, all right, we can work together. We can do this.
Yeah.
They do kind of evolve their relationship, though. Emma's got very tired of Bond's shit very quickly. Yeah. And he's like, "You've gone rogue, Bond." It's like, didn't I just join up with you last week, Mallory? Like, what happened? What happened in the like a couple of years in between? Has he just gone rogue a bunch of times?
Bond's a very tiring man to work with. It doesn't take long.
I can imagine. A lot of paperwork when Bond is your employee.
He's a disobedient son.
It was fun when he wasn't the boss. It was like, oh yeah, I'll go along with it. And now it's like, oh.
And so the Oberhauser twist also was hammered down by Purvis and Wade. Apparently, this was something that they struggled with right from inception all the way through shooting, was trying to make this work. And they took this from the novel Octopussy, and it was something that Sam Mendes was really interested in and proved to be the biggest hurdle for them in terms of writing the screenplay. And we'll debate whether that worked out. But apparently, like, what settled Sam Mendes down and actually kind of got him, like, secured as opposed to being on the verge of leaving was the hiring of Léa Seydoux and Christoph Waltz, who he's really excited about working with. And things kind of, once Purvis and Wade had something workable, things settled down. They did, however, bring in Jez Butterworth, who'd done uncredited Skyfall work. He's probably best known for Edge of Tomorrow or Black Mass. And he did considerable amount of work on this if he got a credit, because he'd done polishes on Skyfall without credit. And apparently he was guided by Daniel Craig and Sam Mendes during production on this movie. And I would have to guess that means a fair amount changed over the course of shooting, because I found a note. The 16th draft of the script introduced the torture surgery chair that plays a prominent role in the Blofeld sequence later in the movie. That was like added months and months and months into production.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, this was something that was not in the scripts that were being greenlit and going through production.
I remember one of the leaks I remember reading, the original confrontation, because I know that confrontation, the third act, was the thing that nobody agreed on right up until the end. They sort of, I mean, obviously there's a lot of disagreement throughout the production, as you've sort of laid out, but the third act, and I think without skipping ahead, it shows. That's the part of the movie that I think even people who like the movie, like myself, yeah, the third act kind of falls apart. I remember reading one of the leaks where they said they were trying to debate what the final confrontation between, well, not the final, but the first confrontation between Bond and Blofeld should be. And I remember you might be getting to this in your notes, I don't want to skip ahead, but there was something like a card game that Bond and Blofeld had played as young men, that it involved like conch shells or something. It involved some like weird like idiosyncratic kind of thing. And they were going to sit down and play this game, and everyone was like, why are they playing this complicated game? It doesn't make any sense. It's way too much to expect the audience to sort of pick up in the second hour of this movie. And I think that in their head, it was like a callback to Casino Royale, but it just didn't work. It wasn't working. And so then I think what I remember reading was that the torture chair came out of that. They're like, well, we need them to have some conversation. This card game isn't working. Torture. Let's just do a torture scene. We'll figure it out. That's what I remember reading in these like mountain of notes.
See, I was learning that this was a late invention, that it was something to do with Daniel Craig's injury, which I'm sure we're going to talk about in a second. It's like, we can shoot him laying down for a week.
Oh.
No, it doesn't seem to be the case. My guess is when they looked at what they had, you're coming off of Silva as your villain of Skyfall, who had a real impact on audiences. And my guess is they were also looking at the script and looking at what they've shot and going like, we need Blofeld to really pop. Like, he needs to be like a character that people walk out talking about. And he doesn't have anything that's that exciting.
Oh, we did. We did talk about him.
Got the wish.
Yeah. I mean, you even get that in like his introduction, kind of talking about the meteor and everything Silva, like that. That's I mean, they basically tried to replicate the rat story that Silva's doing. Yeah,
bold of them to have his first line be, "You can touch it if you like." Very very It's like they're trying to riff on that sexual energy from Silva.
Yeah,
it doesn't work when they're brothers.
No, oh my god. Oh my god. You're so right. Oh no. Yeeks. Oh.
Yeah. So Scott, you queued me up there. Craig suffered a knee injury shooting the big train fight with Dave Bautista. And they had to rearrange the schedule while he healed up. But it was worsened later on doing the parade sequence, which was shot later. And the parade from the beginning of the movie. And Craig was in a fair amount of misery during this, which probably explains why when he was asked on the press tour if he, was really excited to do another Bond movie, his answers were pretty rough.
We've all been tired before. We've all been grouchy before. I think I can put myself in his shoes. I remember having a really fun argument with someone on Twitter that he never said that. And I just loved sending him the clip. Oh yeah, that. Like it's a thing that Daniel Craig, he was done for a little while. He was done. I think we all would have been done.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's so strange that someone tried to deny that it actually happened. That's the internet is a strange place.
It certainly is. It certainly is.
Yeah, and the movie was originally going to end with the line, "We have all the time in the world." It was cut. And obviously played a very prominent role when we got to No Time to Die, which we'll talk about another day.
See, I've heard this being bandied around in Bond circles as trivia. Did that mean they shot that scene? Or is it more they had planned to and they thought, maybe not?
I don't know. There's never been a deleted scene released, so we don't really know.
Because he gets the DB5 at the end. Like, it does feel they could have done that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. One for the people with the behind-the-scenes knowledge, let us know. Drop us a secret email, and we won't tell anyone, I promise.
So the budget for this movie was $245 million. Wow. $45 million up from Skyfall. And domestically, it did $200.1 million. International, $680.6 for a worldwide total of $880.7. Now, that's a very impressive number, but Skyfall had done $1.1 billion, so it was seen as a little bit of a downgrade, but $880 million for a Bond film is still very impressive.
Yeah. And you don't have that 50th anniversary to ride on either.
Yeah. Where does that sit against the other ones? Is it like the second most popular of all time in terms of box office?
Yeah, it would be just behind Skyfall at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you adjust for inflation. If you adjust for inflation, I think Thunderball is still like the most profitable. I think
Thunderball,
yeah,
Moonraker was huge.
Moonraker, yeah, but that's like if you adjust for inflation, because otherwise, obviously, these modern films would eclipse them.
Sure.
And it landed at number 6 at the worldwide box office for the year, right between two family films, Minions and Inside Out.
Wow, we're really running the gamut of family films there. We got like one incredibly beautiful Pixar movie and then the bane of my existence on the other side. So,
well, there goes your invite for when we tackle the Minions films.
Oh yes, it is a spy. It is a spy film.
Don't remind me.
And the top 3 for the year, number 1 was Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens.
Sure.
Number 2 was Jurassic World. And number 3 was Furious 7. At the Oscars this year, the Writings on the Wall song by Sam Smith won the Best Original Song. It also won the Golden Globe. Notably, the BAFTAs, who loved Skyfall, fell over backwards nominating Skyfall for awards. Did not nominate Spectre for a single thing.
Wow.
Can't say I'm surprised.
Not even for the Writings on the Wall.
Nothing.
Wow.
Yikes.
I guess that's like, it feels like it's family at that point. You can get away with criticizing them a little bit more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The Americans were like, yeah, we'll give you an award, sure. The British were like, yeah, we know you could do better.
Try harder next time.
Yeah.
Well, it's an interesting film to sort of tackle its history and how we got here. But let's look at the return of the Spectre organization, the return of Blofeld, the 4th Daniel Craig film. Let's talk about Spectre. Gents, you're here. You are fans of it. I want to know, Brody first. Let's have you up first.
All right.
What do you think of Spectre in the year 2023?
Spectre in the year 2023. I'm gonna go to bat for this film pretty much every time. I don't know. The analogy that I use, and this is kind of it's a vibes movie. It's a movie that there isn't. If you're going into it to like really follow the plot, it's not very exciting. It's the action I think is serviceable. There's some standout moments like the fight with Hanks or the pre-title sequence, but in general, I think several of the set pieces are a little underwhelming. And then beyond that, I think because there is such a split between what Bond is doing and what MI6 is doing for most of the film, there is a bit of a... It feels like the movie lacks some momentum for good portions of it. And so what you're left with is this really moody kind of vibes movie where it's like it's all about death and it's very morose, and even visually it looks quite drab. And I mean, not drab, it looks beautiful, but there is like a very muted palette. And personally, I love that. I can get on board with it. I love Thunderball. I think Thunderball is a very similar movie in that it is a vibes movie. Mm-hmm. You just got to go with it because it's a very slow, and if you don't want to, if you're not patient with it, you lose it very quickly because it's like, oh, okay, they're in the water still. All right, sure. And I think this is very similar. Like, Bond takes his time. There isn't a real sense of urgency, even though maybe there should be. But for some reason, I keep coming back to it. There's something very addictive about how morose it is and how I think they nail it in terms of like the theme of death. This sort of this shadow, this specter hanging over the film. I think Sam Mendes, to his credit, he gets that across. The movie feels like death, which again, take or leave, but Yeah, so that's my kind of my initial draw to it. I can overlook some of the plot contrivances or the kind of the weird directions and decisions they make because I'm so engaged with it on a tonal level. And I think, honestly, Daniel Craig does some really good work, despite the fact that he is, behind the scenes quite miserable. I think he's sort of getting to show more of his humorous side. The movie isn't a very funny movie, but he has some funny moments in it. I like the moment when he punches the guy in the gut and he's like, stay. Like, stuff like that.
Yeah,
Daniel Craig wouldn't have gotten away with that earlier, and it's nice that he's sort of settled into the role now where he can sort of explore different dimensions of it while still being quite dramatic and serious. So yeah, there are aspects of that I like, and I will come to bat for the romance as well. But I'm sure we'll get into that a little later.
Yeah.
But I'll defend it. I think it's not, it's not as good as the Bond and Vesper relationship, which is, I think, maybe the downfall of it because it's going to be inevitably compared. But I think we've gotten less from Bond, Bond girl relationships, and
you'll get no argument from me there. No.
Yeah, so I honestly, as a package, I think it still works, even though it's not perfect. But I wouldn't be comfortable calling it mediocre. It's just different, I guess.
Like, it does a lot for you, but it isn't perfect.
No, yeah, I wouldn't go and say like, oh, it's exciting, and because it's not. It's not an exciting movie. It's not and maybe that's what you go to a Bond movie for.
It's not exciting.
Yeah, no, but it's truly not, and I think that's okay. I think that's kind of there are 25 of these things now. I'm okay with one of them, or 2 of them if you count Thunderball, being just these kind of chill hangouts that I just put on as a mood piece. But yeah. Anyway, I'll stop prattling on.
Hey, you're on one end of the spectrum now, so we've got to figure out where everyone else is.
Yes.
Griffin, what about you?
Spectrum.
What's that, Cam?
Yeah.
Spectrum.
Oh, I talked right over a really good line there. I'm sorry, everyone. Everyone should clap for Cam. Well done. Well done.
Yeah.
We know what C stands for now. Griffin, what about you? What do you think about Spectre now?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Brody summed it up beautifully, because the same thing that kept me going back to it was the atmosphere. It is the vibes. I mean, it's also the same reason, again, I'm going to echo exactly what he said, why I am drawn to Thunderball too. Like, and it's not one that like in a weird sense, like both Spectre and Thunderball are films that I can just like kind of put on in the background and just kind of like have going on while I'm doing other things and go back to it and check it out and whatever. But like there is this like allure to it that I again, they fucking nailed the tone in this movie like so well. It's consistent. It's consistent with Bond's journey, with the characters sort of, having to battle like the literal ghosts of their past coming back to haunt them, and whether or not they're going to be dictated by that, or whether they're going to push forward and move forward with their lives and everything. I think it's like, again, yeah, you don't get that thematic consistency without a mind like Sam Mendes at the helm of this. There's like he's definitely drawing from like his work in the theater, and like that's there in Skyfall, and that's there in this. And I also like how it's an interesting, it continues on that messaging of Skyfall without being a complete retread, right? Of balancing the old with the new. It's like, okay, now that we've come to terms with the fact that like sometimes you do need the old ways in order to like kind of move forward. You can't just solely rely on technology. So how do we apply that to the world of espionage and stuff like that? And so we've got like C, who's like, okay, we're gonna just like completely surveil everything. And this is before his intentions and whatever. It's like we have C, who's like, we're going to completely rely on surveillance and these new forms of technology because of what happened with Silva in the events of Skyfall. And Bond is out there kind of doing his own thing to show that you shouldn't put all of your faith in that, because you need the instincts and intuition of an agent. The great line from Mallory, which is like, sometimes you need to know when a trigger like, or what is it? It's like a license to kill is also a license not to kill. Like that's the whole kind of battle here with like the technology and the surveillance, with like Bond going rogue, and then you have Mallory kind of in the middle trying to grapple with like a space that's like moving on away from what he's used to, but then also it's like on the other hand, Bond isn't necessarily listening to him and whatever. And I think he has to kind of come to respect and understand that sometimes Bond's intuition and his instincts are like, he needs to just kind of like trust that, because he's never let him down before. He has no reason to let him down before. And then on the flip side, I think with Bond has to stop being a petulant child, I think, and like learn to respect his superiors and work with them in order for this whole thing to kind of work as best it can. That's the other part I love about this film, is that it builds upon the MI6 fam from the previous film, and we see them all become a unit and bringing different skill sets to the table. Obviously amounting in them all working to stop Blofeld at the end of the film, which is great. I think it's a incredibly well made movie that commits to an idea. Whether or not those ideas are for you, or you think they were executed as well as they could have been, that's obviously up to the person. But I think for me, by and large, it does what it sets out to do, like fairly well. Maybe except for that like third act hiccup where things don't come together as cleanly as they should. But
it's interesting that you both draw a sort of correlation between this and Thunderball, because, well, for those who know my thoughts on Thunderball, this might give you an idea of my thoughts on this film. But I think before we get there, Cam, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I have watched Spectre a number of times over the years, and I find my opinion on it kind of shifts back and forth a little bit. My rewatch last night, I think my main takeaway was that, like, I don't know that Sam Mendes should have come back for this movie, but at the same time, he's invaluable to this movie. Mm-hmm. Because I think what happens here is, like, when I watch Spectre, I very much see, in many ways, repeating the beats of Skyfall, like trying to essentially do the same thing again. And it's not doing it quite as well. The script, I think, is very messy for this movie. There's a lot of problems going on with just the story of Spectre. But because you have a director who's so good at working with actors, visual storytelling, mood, tone, all of that, it holds together in a way that it wouldn't if you did not have a director who could do that. But it did leave me wondering, like, did this director have another Bond story to tell that he could be passionate about? I'm not so sure. And I think that's kind of on the negative side of bringing him back. It seems like he was very exhausted by this whole process, and I think he was kind of like, yeah, I'm definitely never doing another one again after Spectre. I don't think he was going to sign on to be their go-to guy for the future. But there's so much good in it, even though, like, I feel like one of the biggest problems with this movie is the just unbelievable amount of importance they place on the events of this movie over Bond's personal story. It's like they're trying to do what they did with M and Silva in Skyfall towards Bond and Blofeld here. It just does not work for me at all. It feels more like, honestly, I kept thinking of the Sandman killing Uncle Ben in Spider-Man 3. Where it's like, we're trying to create a personal connection that really did not exist that much before, but we're trying to turn it into something here, and it's just not clicking. And so that sort of stuff doesn't work for me. But at the same time, you guys talk about, like, vibes. There are unbelievable sequences or scenes in this movie. The Spectre meeting is incredible. Yeah. Just a fantastic set piece. A little moment, Monica Bellucci walking out towards, like, the pool or whatever.
Oh my god.
Yes. Yeah.
The opera music playing and the hitmen all coming up behind her. Brilliantly directed. There's so many moments like that I can never dislike this movie. I know there's a lot of people that, like, really don't like Spectre. Like, we'll just say that is a legit terrible movie. To me, there's so much of value in it that it makes it that much more frustrating when I see kind of recycling from the previous movie that's not as good, and just very, very messy plot elements that I just scratch my head and go like, it's like they had an idea. It was obviously something they were struggling with, but they would not cut it loose. They were like, nope, we will not rethink this. We must hold the course. We have tunnel vision on what this needs to be. And I just think they probably should have changed some things for sure.
Yeah, well, it's funny. Before we go to you, Scott, sorry, I wanted to, because you brought up something that I was talking with Brody about literally right before we jumped on here, and it was the fact that I think a lot of the issues with the movie stem from them trying too hard to literalize the message and the themes that they're trying to explore here. Because I agree with you, they had an idea with what they wanted to do with Bond thematically. They didn't know how to put that into action, and so you get something like Blofeld being Bond's brother, which I know we'll explore a little bit later, but like Blofeld being Bond's brother, I understand symbolically what that's representing and like how that's supposed to affect Bond and why he has to overcome that, and he's gonna let the past die, move forward, whatever. He's not gonna be dictated by fear and all that. It's a great idea, but you didn't have to necessarily go that far with it. So it's like, I respect the decision, I respect the boldness of the decision. Does it? I don't know. Was it the right decision? I don't necessarily think so, but I can see their intent behind doing it. It was just a bit too like literal, I guess is how I would put it.
Yeah.
So when I was in school, I didn't have a lot of friends. Right. I had a small group of friends.
What has this movie done to you, Scott?
Yeah.
Become very pensive.
Yeah. And I always wanted to be part of a bigger group, and a part of me wants to jump on this bandwagon of liking Spectre and sort of giving it, a free pass. But honestly, for me, I think this film is aptly named because it's a shadow of its former self.
Ooh.
I'm sure I've taken that off of the Times headline with the review or something like that. I didn't come up with it. But I love Skyfall. And it's like, I don't like anything this film is doing. I don't like hangout Bond films. I don't like Thunderball. I find it entirely boring, and I went on the record saying so. So I'm hanging out, I'm vibing with Bond along this journey through death. Very miserable. And there's barely any bright moments in this film. And if color palette aside, there really isn't any bright moments at all. You look at this almost like Technicolor of Skyfall, with all those rich blues and reds they put out, and this is just yellow. But I'll put that to one side. Everything just feels like it's a step down, and it just feels like it's a shame. You've got all of this talent, all of this goodwill from the audience, from Skyfall. They're like, hey, give me another one. I'm ready. I'm going to turn up. And they didn't deliver. The story is not interesting. I don't think the Blofeld thing works for me. I don't think I can ever justify that to myself. I'll stick up for Leia Seydoux. I don't know why she gets all this flack online. I think she does great with what she's given. Much like, recent guest on the show, Denise Richards, gets a lot of stick for her Dr. Christmas Jones. Again, did what she was asked to do.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the story, when it comes to the relationships, when it comes to the vibe of the film, the vibe is the word you guys were using. Maybe I'm just not on its wavelength and I'm not catching it. But I sit through this film every time, the 2 times from watching it and then the 2 times watching it for this, and I'm unengaged, looking at my phone, and I shouldn't be doing this for a Bond film. You put Skyfall on, I'm attached to the screen for the 2 hours and 15 minutes. This film, 2 hours and 30, not the longest, but it felt 2 hours and 30.
I always say, Bond films are classics because they're rewatched. I don't know that Spectre is the most rewatchable of Bond films. And that's something that I do struggle with. And I'm curious,
not sure
Scott,
Brody would agree.
Well, maybe so.
He's the only maniac on the planet, though, who has seen Spectre.
I pop it on. I just put it on and vibe with. Honestly, not to cut you off on your point, but I think it's interesting. We keep comparing it to Skyfall, and I think that is definitely inevitable. Like, I mean, that is just, it is Sam Mendes' second attempt, and he's obviously riffing on what worked about Skyfall, and that's why they wanted him back. To me, what I find so interesting about it, and what I think I appreciate about it, is I love that it's in conversation with Skyfall. I kind of feel like this is the response to Skyfall. Like, Sam Mendes said everything he had to say about a Bond film in Skyfall, and then they asked him back, and he said, okay, well, how can I kind of challenge maybe some of the things that I brought up in that film? And so I think, because Skyfall, I think, when you look at it, like, very, top down, it's an unconventional Bond film that sort of brings Bond back to a conventional place. It's like Bond, kind of goes through this crisis of the soul, and in the end, he gets Q back, he gets Moneypenny back, he gets an M, and he's back getting the mission at the end, and we're back to business. And then, kind of as the mirror image to that, Spectre is kind of a very conventional Bond story that basically has Bond figure out that, actually, yeah, I know I came back around to this whole lifestyle in Skyfall, but actually I hate it and I want to leave. And I think something about that I find really interesting. Just the fact that, like, we get, like, everyone's been begging for, like, the Bond goes and gets his mission and then goes and does his thing, and the very conventional formulaic sort of story. And Spectre is that story with some bells and whistles sort of attached. And I don't know, I find that kind of interesting, just how it is kind of reflecting what Skyfall was saying about the character. And yeah, I think they try to replicate some of the hype with Silva, and they try to replicate the relationships a little bit. But ultimately, I think, despite that, the film is almost the polar opposite of Skyfall, which I kind of just, I think it's, for bringing a filmmaker back, is a really just a very interesting thing to do. Lewis Gilbert did 3, and he basically just made the same movie 3 times. And, that's fair enough. That's, it worked, and why not? And, you could accuse Sam Mendes of doing the same thing, but I think I don't know, I kind of get, like, he's a little more savvy about it. He's like, yeah, I know people are expecting this to be Skyfall again, and I will give them the things that they liked about Skyfall, hopefully. But, I don't know, the movie kind of is almost the antithesis of Skyfall. And maybe that's why, as someone who loves Skyfall, it doesn't, like, gel. But I love Skyfall too, but, like, I don't know, for some reason I find that really just compelling in and of itself. Just this idea of this filmmaker going back and saying, maybe I would, if I did this again, I would do it the complete opposite, just to see how it goes, But anyway.
Well, what I find, like, when I was talking about, like, rewatchability, I don't have an issue with the Bond stuff so much. I think what, for me, makes it kind of a tough rewatch is that when you introduced all these great actors as the MI6 kind of support team, the Scooby Gang, if you will, it's like you cannot give these actors, like, what the people of the past were getting in these movies, like Bernard Lee or Lois Maxwell, where it's like basically one scene. And it almost feels like this whole C subplot to me just drags down the energy of the movie. Yeah. How much time we spend with a very, very, very obvious villain.
Yeah.
And what's going on back there, it's kind of detracting from the Bond story. And I know a lot of the criticisms are about the love story, or perhaps the lack of chemistry between Bond and Madeleine in this film. But I also wonder, like, if you were to tone down a lot of this kind of extraneous stuff in terms of C and all that subplot, if you could have focused more on the relationship and made it feel earned. Like, when she says, "I love you," when he's in the torture chair, I sit there and just blink. I should feel something. It should feel like, oh my God, it's like, it has that kind of impact you get, say, like the moment in Casino Royale when him and Vesper are sitting in the shower, or even Camille in Quantum when they are huddled together in the fire at the end of that movie, where I feel a genuine connection between them. When this, this whole relationship with Madeleine, when it gets to that torture chair, I just don't feel anything. And I think having such a scattered focus really kind of disrupts the pace of the movie, but also that relationship.
I agree on the C front. It's actually something I want to bring up in the dislike section. But let's talk good stuff. Let's talk the things we did like. Let's relish in the Spectre for a moment or two. Griffin, I'll throw to you first. Something you want to bring up that you really liked about the film you want to discuss.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't really talked about it yet, but just that opening, the pre-title sequence, for my money, that is like a top 5 pre-title sequence in the entire series. It's so exhilarating. Like, part of me almost wishes the whole thing was a one take. I think that's the only negative about the whole sequence. Now, I mean, logistically, that probably would have been really difficult to pull off, and like that, there's your budget, right? But I love the confidence with which the movie starts, and it's just like, nah, we're gonna do the typical Bond, pre-title sequence mission, but we're gonna add some flair to it. We're really gonna like, call upon our craft people to bring it give it everything they've got and bring out all the stops. And and it's such a great way to kind of just like, the whole movie's dealing with death, and here we are starting at the Day of the Dead, the Dias de los Muertos thing in Mexico, and we're just like coming in. The first thing we see is like a skeleton. It's like Bond's in this skull mask. It's just like, that's the other thing. Like, the costumes in this section are incredible. Yeah. It's not like a really flashy one either. Like, that's the thing. Like, it's so just like subtle and slick, and it's just like, all right, we're gonna follow Bond to his target, and he's gonna shoot the target, and then we'll see what happens next, and we can ramp up the intensity and everything. And I just like that sequence is just, oh my god, every time I watch it, I'm just constantly in awe of how they pulled it off, especially because I believe Daniel Craig was injured while they filmed this, which was part of the reason why I think they shot it as a oneer. I could maybe that's not entirely accurate, but I thought I remembered hearing something about that. But I don't know. I mean, like, I don't know if any of you want to chime in on the oneer specifically, but that is like easily my favorite part of the whole film, like from just a filmmaking perspective.
Well, there's a reason why 2 of our guests this week, Gianni Tamine, the costume designer, and Gary Powell, the stunt coordinator, both spoke at length about this sequence. They both loved putting it together. I think it's probably one of the... Actually, I'll say it's probably the best moment of the film. Yeah. I think it's the highlight of the film for me, personally speaking. It's action, and I like the action.
I really like the Spectre meeting, but yeah.
The Spectre meeting is a great quiet moment. Maybe it depends on what you're coming to a Bond film for. I like a bit of action. This is the moment where I'm like, okay, I'm ready. I'm strapped in. Let's go on this helicopter ride. The rest of the film is, we'll get to that. But I'm with you, Griffin. I think it's a wonderful moment in the film.
I love when the camera pans over at the very start, like just this vast parade, and you can actually spot Bond and Estrella like on the right side of the screen as it whips over them. I love that sort of detail. Also, when they go into the hotel and get into the elevator, that's the elevator from License to Kill that Pam Bouvier got into.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Is it the same one? I hear this, but I'm not sure.
It's the exact same door.
Okay.
Look at that.
And it is in Mexico, so same location.
Yeah. See?
Okay. All right. I trust you, Cam. I trust you. Well, what about you, Brody? Something you really like?
Oh, well, how long have we got? No,
Sit back, everyone. Enjoy.
Yeah, right. All right. Yeah. So, Iris in on Mexico. No, so I'm going to pick one thing that because we talked a bit about this earlier, and I don't know if we're going to come back to it, so I want to just get my thoughts on the table on this. I really have grown to appreciate Madeleine as a character, Madeleine Swann, in this film specifically. I know we get a lot more of her in
echo this.
No Time to Die, and I think that definitely does a lot to round her out and maybe make their relationship make more sense. But honestly, I got pretty much all I needed in this film. The way I view that relationship, and I don't know if this is intentional on the part of the filmmakers or the actors involved, to me it's a end of life second marriage. It's like when you're like, I'll speak from personal experience. So my nana passed away relatively young compared to like my grandfather, and my grandfather eventually he like remarried, or he didn't remarry, but he's like in a relationship now with another woman, and that is kind of the vibe I get from Bond and Madeleine, where it's sort of like a I don't want to die alone kind of thing, which is
Yeah.
No, I mean, that makes it sound quite trivial and quite bad, but I think there's something kind of beautiful in that, like, these two sort of lost souls who don't really, like, they can't escape this cycle of violence that they keep finding themselves in. Bond can't escape his work, and Madeline can't escape her father's kind of influence on her life. Kind of finding each other and saying, you know what, I'll walk away with you. I like you. I can spend time with you. I don't really know enough about you, but I think No Time to Die explores that angle of it very nicely. But I like the idea that there's this kind of this, I like that we can just sort of understand each other in a way, but it doesn't have to be as passionate as maybe our past loves. It's not going to be Vesper. He's never going to sort of rekindle that passion, but you know, he likes and understands Madeline. And I kind of got that throughout this, where Bond, I agreed. Her saying "I love you," really, really kind of a weird line. They probably shouldn't have written it that way, because I don't think the way Léa Seydoux like delivers the line conveys actual, you know, love. But there is kind of a, like, I care about you. You know what I mean? That's like what I get from that moment. And I think a better sort of encapsulation of their relationship is when they're in the car driving up to Blofeld's, you know, base, and she just like grabs his hand and she's like, I'm scared. And he's like, you know, I can't even remember what his line back to her is, but it's like, I know, you know what I mean? Like, this is kind of this understanding between the two of them. It's like, you know, you can lean on me, I'll lean on you. And that's what this is. And to me, that was what the relationship, all it needed to be. And so, yeah, I love you, take it or leave it. It probably puts way too much on the shoulders of this relationship. But that aside, I really like the dynamic between the two of them. I think they have really good chemistry. I know a lot of people disagree, but I think Craig and Seydoux both have like this kind of very cold, distant kind of, they give off this aura, at least in the roles, right? Like, I'm sure they're very warm, lovely people in real life, but in their respective roles, they are both very cold and distant. And there's something kind of nice about these two cold and distant people. Kind of, they kind of come together, and you see a bit of warmth between the two of them, but they're never going to open up to each other in the way that maybe they should. And obviously, again, we see what comes of that in the next film. But even in this film alone, I've always really appreciated that. And as time goes on, I've just really come to I'm saying really a lot, but I've really come to appreciate what that means to both characters and just take it for what it is. I'm repeating myself, but I just think it's quite charming.
Yeah. Well, to piggyback off of what he's saying, I think the thing that really that sold me on their relationship, because I agree, I also buy into that relationship too on that level as well, was when they go into the secret room together, which actually, now that I think about it, that might be one of my favorite sequences. In the entire movie, because there's no dialogue. They're looking at the past memories and the pain that led them both to each other, that led them to this moment of where they're together. And I think silently, that's where they come to understand that they actually have a lot more in common than they realize, even though she's the daughter of the guy that killed or led to the death of Vesper. And so I think both of them kind of reflecting in that room on their past trauma, and then looking at one another and like viewing them in a different light. I don't know. I just, and that's another one that is like, it's all about the filmmaking. A lesser filmmaker would not have been able to pull a scene like that off, or a scene like that would have just felt arbitrary or whatever. But because there's so much intent behind there's so much intention behind what Sam Mendes is doing with Craig and Léa Seydoux, and how he's trying to sell you on that relationship in a different way than what we're used to. I think it sings. It's just it's one of the best examples of the actors authentically playing their characters, the filmmaker having this vision for what he wants to do with a sequence, and then like aesthetically, atmospherically. I mean, even Thomas Newman's score, which I know gets a lot of flack in this film, I've come around on. I've come to really quite enjoy it.
I kind of like the heavy metal guitar at the end. I'm down with it.
Yeah. It's I get it. But like in that moment, it's just like everything is working together, and it's like you get a glimpse of like, maybe not everything is on this level, but this is like what at its core that this represents their ambitions with the film.
Yeah, and I think to your point, I mean, like, not to, I'll be quick about this, but I to your point about like what Sam Mendes brings to the film, yeah, as written, I don't think Bond and Madeleine are a very compelling relationship. It's very generic. It is absolutely elevated by Sam Mendes and Daniel Craig and Léa Seydoux. It is a microcosm of the film that I think they are elevating what's on the page in a way to deliver something that maybe isn't perfect, but is more compelling than it really has any right to be. And that's kind of, that relationship to me rests on the shoulders of those three sort of filmmakers. But yeah.
There's that sequence in the secret room they wander into there that I did appreciate Mr. White's Do It For Her board, which reminded me a lot of that Simpsons episode with Maggie Simpson where Homer has the Do It For Her at the nuclear power plant and you have all the childhood photos of Madeleine. I was like, good on you, Mr. White. You're not so bad.
I never pieced that together.
Just slaving away at Spectre, trying to put food on the table.
Oh my god! Oh my god! That's so funny.
Setting off detonations across the world and looking up at that board and being like, "It's all for you, kid. It's all for you."
The boss shows up for dinner. It's like, great, can't get away from the office.
He's making love to your wife. He's having dinner with your family.
This poor fella.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
Calling all agents. Independent podcasting, much like the spy game, requires considerable resources. Whether it's research, equipment, hosting, or of course constructing a top secret volcano lair, we're putting out the call for your support.
That's right. As you may know, we've activated the SpyHards Patreon, home of our ever-growing lineup of Agents in the Field episodes where we decode non-spy films from your favorite spy actors and full film commentaries with more intel than a Basil exposition briefing.
Cam, what have we got in our crosshairs this month?
Harrison Ford's on the run and we're in pursuit because we are tackling 1993's The Fugitive, and I promise you, you will care about this one.
And if that sounds delicious, then become a true spy hard today and join the circus at patreon.com/spyhards. But before this message self-destructs, Cam, resume the spy jinx. Well, what about you, Cam? Something you want to highlight?
I'm going to highlight the villains of this movie. And I don't think many people would put them in the top tier of Bond villains, but
I respect it.
I am a villain guy. And if you give me memorable villains, that'll go a long ways towards getting me on board. And I think like Mr. White is a continued invaluable presence in this franchise. I love that they bring him back and give him a very, very good death scene.
Yep.
And he gets the classic, kite dancing in a hurricane line. I just think this character was so invaluable to the Craig series that he's kind of underrated because so much of it became about Blofeld and Spectre and then all the stuff in the final film with Safin. But I look at Mr. White as like the big icon of the Craig era. I love what they do with him here. Hinks is a mixed bag. I love that Sam Mendes is clearly trying to do a Spy Who Loved Me riff with Jaws. It's a lot of fun. I like that there's the moment where Bond's in the plane. People hate that plane sequence, but I actually like it. But Bond is in the plane flying next to the truck, and the two of them look and acknowledge each other, which is very much like Naomie and Bond in The Spy Who Loved Me.
Yeah.
And then you have Hinks crashing through the windshield of the car. It's playing that whole indestructible henchman stuff. Really fun. And their fight on the train is a huge showstopper, but I really like the introduction of Hinks as well, where he comes in and just takes out that guy's eyes in a really, frankly, brutal sequence for a PG-13 movie, but
yeah, man,
there's a lot of promise to Hinks. I don't think they quite hit a home run, but there's enough there that I walk out very happy with that character. And Blofeld as well. He improves, I think, in the next film. I think they figured out what to do with Blofeld.
When he dies.
But when you have... True. But when you have Christoph Waltz and you have him tapping away at that computer doing the torture chair, he's making that sing, even though it could be very corny.
Yeah.
I agree with you on most of that. Maybe not so much the Blofeld front. I do love Mr. Hinks. I do have a question though, and that is, what on earth was that gun?
Oh, the double barrel gun?
Oh yeah, it's like something out of a Matt Helm film. It's bizarre.
Yeah. Well, I have two criticisms of Hinks. and they both relate to his little
Is it both his thumbs?
Well, okay, so it's his gimmicks. So the gun is introduced, very cool, but they never really make an on the nose kind of reference to his special gun or anything. Like, they never play that up. I think that should have been a stronger element of the character. Same with the thumbs. You introduce a character with blade thumbs, you have to pay those off later on down the road. You've got to see him using those against Bond. There's a scene, or a snippet, I should say, in the train fight, which one of the all-time great Bond fights, you know, up there with like a From Russia with Love in terms of brutality and impact. Great sequence. But there's a part where, you know, Hinks's fist slams down, and there's a camera close-up of his hand. Those blades are on the thumb, and yet they are not showing showing him use them at all in that fight. So it's bits like that. I'm like, you create like a Jaws-like henchman, play up the gimmickry of it. You can do it in a way that still kind of ties into that gritty, sort of more grounded aesthetic they're going for, but they don't. They just kind of like ignore it. And same with the gun. They should have done more with that.
I would agree. I think if I'm going to throw my like in, and I think it connects well to yours, so it's actually a good time to say it, it's just the action of this film. I think Gary Powell does a wonderful job with this film. We talked about the pre-title sequence with all the stuff with the helicopter. That's fantastic. The train is amazing. The chase through Rome, I think, of the cars, I think is still quite nice to put together. It's nice seeing the Lamborghini going around as well. Yeah. And also, like, the explosion at Blofeld's lab, which I think was billed as like the biggest explosion on film.
At the time, I don't know if it's been beaten, but yeah.
I think Oppenheimer's probably going to give it a run for its money.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah. But I think in terms of this film, it does spectacle well, which I know Spectacle. We'll workshop that one, guys. Sorry. But yeah, I think it does action on a grand scale, and when it does it well, that brings me back into the film. The train sequence, Cam, I think is a great thing to shout out, but there's a lot of build up to that too, much like From Russia with Love. Them going out to dinner, that dress, when she turns up in that dress, and it's just meant to, like, wow, she stuns you with that. And also you get to see Craig in the white tux, which is nice to see, just ticking everyone off on the white tux list there. So yeah, I think the action is phenomenal in this film when it's focused on.
Yeah, I mean, I remember there was an article where they looked at movies they hated that had a scene that they held up as like, this is an amazing scene in a bad movie. And I don't agree with this criticism, but they did include Spectre in that. And they cited that train sequence and were like, they felt it was a bad movie, but the train sequence was so unassailable in terms of its impact and just the high degree of fight choreography going on that they were like, that's kind of the gem in this movie. I don't obviously dislike Spectre that much, but that train sequence is next level.
Was that a Jaws riff with the canisters?
Okay, yeah, I know what you mean, because the barrels thing in Jaws is so iconic, but it is kind of weird that you do it to a character named Mr. Hinks.
Yeah.
Yeah?
I think like that's just Sam Mendes just being like, yeah, sure, let's do Jaws. Like, it's kind of, it was like running out of homage. So he's like, you know, we're already doing sort of we're already doing a Casablanca thing, so throw Jaws in.
Can we do Spielberg? Yeah, okay, let's chuck that in.
Yeah,
why not?
Why not?
Yeah.
He does seem to be a child of the 70s, so maybe that's like kind of his hat tip there. With the car chase, I'm interested because I honestly, as a defender of Spectre, I honestly think the car chase is I'm more on the fence with the car chase because I think it is gorgeous. I think like those two supercars, the fact that they are on location in, like, you know, in Rome, just like spinning around the Vatican's like in the background there. It's like, what other film could get this level of clearance to be driving these supercars on, you know, in the middle of Rome? And so I love that, but there is like a lack of tension with it, where it's like they're almost too afraid to ding up the supercars, and so they all just like they sort of come up next to each other and then they peel off, and again it looks great, but it also feels like they're in more of a race than an actual like life or death car chase. Which again, as someone who appreciates the vibes, is like, yeah, sure, why not? We'll have these supercars speeding around Rome. But I think in terms of like as an action set piece, it maybe falls down a little bit for me, just because I don't feel the gravity of the threat until the very end. And I think, yeah, there's a cool like sort of payoff with the ejector seat, but again, I think the worst damage done to the car is like they use a flamethrower, and it's like, okay, cool. Would have been nice to see more sort of collision, I guess, but
I get that. I like it for the action. And I also like it for the joke being made at 009's expense.
Yeah,
because sure. I do question 009's musical choices. New York, New York. Okay,
Bond, right?
Well, you know, 009 is a different agent altogether.
The thing with the car chases, it looks like a car commercial for a lot of it.
Yes.
It's beautiful, but you know, you were saying about you're saying about like maybe a fear of dinging these cars, but also the location. They were terrified of damaging the location at all because it's ancient setting, right?
That's true.
And I think there's a couple things going on. Maybe they had to be just so overly cautious in staging it that it feels like some of the kind of the visceral nature of the chase is missing. The way you get, I'm not like insanely crazy about the quantum opening car chase, but it has genuine impact. Like at least from an audio standpoint, it really is like a punch starting that movie. Whereas like this one, it's like, it feels kind of slow. And I think there may be some issues of all the cutaways to Moneypenny, which are kind of reducing the tension of it.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with that. The fact that like he's having a phone call, having a chat while this guy is chasing him, and we're never really cutting back to see what's going on with the cars. We're just like, all right, we're just on the road, and there's a guy chasing him. I don't hate the chat in isolation because I like what that does for the Bond Moneypenny relationship. It shows that they're not just like, oh, the secretary and the spy coming in or whatever. Like
I see what you mean, though. Yeah, it does detract from the visceral impact.
And that's my big issue with the car chase. It feels kind of flaccid.
They do wait till they get down to like the floodway before they actually start using their gadgets and stuff. It's like, we've done the car commercial. Now we can actually have some combat, and then
right. And not to jump too far ahead, but I think that is. I have the same issue with the car chase that I also have with the snowplane chase. And in theory, I want to like that snowplane chase because I think it's incredibly well executed on a technical level. I just don't feel anything. I don't, you know, we're just introduced to Madeline. We know who Madeline is, but I'm not like fearful for her life necessarily because I haven't really gotten to know her at that point just yet. I think, you know, having Hinks be the guy who's like trying to shoot down Bond's plane with a gun is cool, but it's just like it's this constant just like momentum, and there's no really like ebb and flows to it. We don't feel like I don't really feel like anyone in this scenario is going to die or get injured or wherever or whatever. And then even to the point where like the wings kind of get cut off the plane and he crashes it into the convoy and everything like that. Like it looks good, but I think just as a sequence, it kind of just like starts at a certain level and it just kind of like maintains that level, which is kind of similar to the issue I have with the car chase. I think the only action sequence that really has like a gradual buildup of tension, which is, you know, at least what I would want from an action sequence, I think, is the detonation stuff at the end of the film when he's trying to get Madeline out. He's trying to rescue Madeline before the building blows up and all of that. That's actually done really, really well, and you can feel the ticking clock and everything. And so and actually even though it's a really small one, the big explosion set piece, I just kind of like it just as a, you know, an action bit. It's obviously just more of like a connective tissue than it necessarily is this big highlight reel or whatever, which is weird given the nature of that explosion. It's just one of those things where it's like, oh, that's the biggest explosion in movie history, like for that scene. Like that's just a weird kind of way to conclude that. So maybe I wanted a little bit more of it, but it's fine. But yeah, that snowplane sequence, man, that sequence really lets me down because it is such a cool concept, and I don't think they executed as well as they could have, perhaps.
It's so interesting because, like, I know your opinion is very common. I've heard that so much about the plane sequence. And it's actually a sequence that I really enjoy whenever I watch the movie, and I'm like, why does this work for me? I don't understand, because clearly I am in the minority on this sequence.
Yeah, for me, honestly, I'll defend Thomas Newman's score, you know, till the sun goes down. But I honestly think in that scene, it's where that's my least favorite track of his. I think in that I think, I mean, music is a huge part of sort of action, like, you know, sequences anyway. And I think throughout the movie, his score works for me, but in some of the action beats, it's a little I don't know, samey. I love the pre-title sequence, but the bits where you can hear him riffing on Skyfall, I'm like, it takes me out of it a little bit, and I wish he hadn't done that. But I get why he's doing it, but yeah, the snowplane chase I like more than I think Griffin does, but but the music is definitely like the thing for me where I'm like, oh, it's stopping me from really loving it. But
Scott, you got to settle it. Where do you stand on the snowplane?
Oh yeah!
Thumbs down.
Let's go. Yeah.
The wings have been clipped. It is plummeting to the earth. It is. It just happens. It just happens, and you kind of want to see.
Yes.
You want to see Daniel Craig and Mr. Hinks fight more. Like I want to see them go, mano a mano, which you get, afterwards, shortly afterwards. But yeah, like it just happens, unfortunately. But speaking of it just happens, let's look at the dislikes before we all go completely cuckoo. Griffin, we'll have you up first. Something you dislike about the film you want to talk about.
I dislike how disconnected the M subplot is from Bond's mission, and I feel like they realize that, at a certain point, and then they were like, oh shit, we gotta bring it together. I feel like they're both going on similar kind of trajectories, and I do like how M kind of grappling with the ghost of spycraft and like how that's informing the future and everything, like how that's that's paralleling Bond, who is being told by the ghost of M to go on this mission, and he's kind of dealing with that, and also he's literally confronting his past with Blofeld and all these other things that are being thrown at him. It's nice. I see why they were cutting back and forth between the two of them, but at some point you got to be like, why are these not more like intertwined? Like, because at the end, when it's revealed that like C's a Spectre plant, it's just sort of like, okay, yeah, I mean that makes sense, but then why did it just felt like they were operating too like separately from one another, that it was like I don't know, I didn't really like. It felt like they just realized it too late, and then they had to bring it all together at the end. And so, like, I would have liked more scenes between M and Bond and sort of exploring, Bond going out on his own and doing this thing, and then like tying it into the MI crew, because at some point the MI crew they're not dumb. They probably would catch on to the fact that like, oh, maybe what Bond is doing is sort of like tying into what's going on with the Nine Eyes and C and all that stuff. And so, and then at the end of the day, the C stuff and that subplot feels very like inconsequential to the climax of the film, because you're really invested in Bond's emotional journey, and the M subplot, the MI6 subplot just like feels like an afterthought when you get to the end. It's like, okay, C dies, they stop the Nine Eyes. I don't really care about that anyways. I'm more invested in like the Bond Blofeld dynamic and whatever. And like, yeah, I get that this is like, M's battle with a similar thing, but I need more of them kind of together, of these subplots intersecting and then becoming one. And it just, they didn't do it as cleanly as I would have liked.
And maybe like a connection between C and Blofeld. Like, if you're going to establish him up as this pawn of Blofeld, give us a scene of them together.
A scene,
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Like, just as like we want to see like M and Bond have some sort of like conversation before the safe house scene, you need to establish what's going on with Blofeld and C or whatever. Like, you don't even have to show Christoph Waltz as Blofeld. You could do the whole like if they wanted to harken back to like things they used in previous films, have the whole like secret Blofeld thing and have C talking to this guy, and you're like, oh, who is that guy? They were so caught up in trying to keep Blofeld a secret, and it's like there were so many opportunities where you could have utilized the his intimidating secret nature of the fact that there is this secret organization out there that is headed by someone that's kind of had his tentacles everywhere. And like, yeah, we got a little bit of that with Quantum, but like, in a film called Spectre that is dealing in Spectre, you're going to assume Ernst Stavro Blofeld is going to be in that movie. And so maybe like teasing him out a little bit, like, yeah, like you said, like the interaction with C and you know, even if it's disguised a bit, like that's exciting stuff, and that builds up your villain so that when you do get that reveal and it's Christoph Waltz walking out and he's like, you can touch it or whatever, it doesn't throw you for a loop, right? Like it's like that's the other thing. It's just like there were so many missed opportunities to like build up Blofeld throughout the film, and then you get it, and then you're just sort of like, I like the performance, I see what they're doing, I'm not feeling much of anything at this moment. And maybe that's the point, right? Like the fact that he is this bitter, petty younger brother or no, sorry, older brother or whatever, playing into the sibling rivalry thing or whatever, the fact that the father preferred him over Blofeld, like, I don't know. It's like, that's an interesting idea. Probably not something that you should have done with Blofeld. Maybe something that you should have done with a separate character who was Franz Oberhauser, right? Like if they had made him an actual character and had his vendetta be against Bond because of the fact that, you know, what happened when they were kids or whatever, that would have played a lot better. And I think even when you get that brother reveal at the end, it's the fact that you tie it into Blofeld that just makes it a little weird, and you wind up weakening the impact of a character that I think fans have wanted to see return to the screen for so long. It's messy, right? Like, because I'm conflicted, because I see the intent. I think thematically it works as a fan of Bond and everything. I don't know. I struggle with that.
I don't think you're saying anything out of order or out of step, particularly. I think a lot of fans would agree with you there. There's definitely like a dissonance in your head that happens when C gets killed, and you're like, all right, well,
exactly, yeah.
I guess I just invested half an hour into nothing. Congratulations.
And why not cast an actor who's like really charming and likable in that role? So at least there's like a fun reveal.
This was like Andrew Scott? Is that chap's name?
Yeah.
Like he was doing, like, Sherlock had been out. Like he was hot stuff at this point. He hadn't done the Hot Priest and Fleabag just yet, but you know, he'd done Sherlock, and he was like the go-to guy for villains in the UK. So I know why they brought him in, and it's because of Sherlock.
Sure, but like why not cast someone who comes across as not a like skeezy villain? Like cast someone who you're.
Chiwetel Ejiofor would have been great. He would have been charismatic at least. Yeah.
Well, we know you couldn't get the part then, Cam.
No, that's true. I look like a weasel. Yeah.
No. But Brody, something from you, something you didn't like.
Yeah, I'm probably gonna touch on a couple like similar things that we're all gonna speak to. I think because I think the flaws with this film are pretty self-explanatory in a lot of ways. The C subplot, to me, I'm of two minds of, because I get that. I appreciate that they don't really try to hide that he's a scumbag, because it's very obvious that you're introducing this new MI6 character, and it's like, well, he's probably not going to stick around for the next one. This guy's probably the bad guy, regardless of how charming and nice he is. But then at the same time, no one seems to really, like Bond especially, he kind of has like that weird interaction with him at the beginning where he calls him C and then goes about his mission, and then he just doesn't seem to think about C ever again. And it's like
because he sees right through him. He sees right through him at the very beginning.
Bond sees right through him, but then he never really comes back to it. And it sort of feels like maybe in the back, like Bond should be going, I'm pursuing this outside of, because he goes rogue, right? And he doesn't communicate with M, and it's never really made explicitly clear that he's doing that because he knows C's bent. He just sort of does it. And it kind of feels like there should have been a moment where maybe he's on the phone with Moneypenny, or he talks to Q in confidence, and he's just like, I don't trust this C guy. This is like, we got to keep this outside of the organization. And yet he never really seems to connect those dots. It's like he meets C, realizes he's a bad guy, and then just forgets about him. And so that I don't think helps the fact that then we keep cutting back to M engaging with C in these like philosophical debates about spycraft and the nature of good and evil. And it's like, we know he's evil. Bond knows he's evil. Surely M knows there's something going on with him. Oh, but then he doesn't do anything. They delay this inevitable reaction, this inevitable reveal. I don't know. Scott, looks like you had something to say.
Well, I will just say, famously in the Skyfall review, I pointed out that I didn't see the Moneypenny reveal coming. I also didn't see the C reveal coming. No. Dang true. Yeah. I saw him like, oh, new guy in the crew. Oh, this is fun. Andrew Scott's here. God. I think like about 2 does where I'm like, oh, something's happening. Maybe he is bad. And then, oh no, he's a baddie and he's dead. But that was it. Like I was like, oh, it's nice to see a new guy. Jeez. This is fun.
Oh wow, they really got you. Huh?
C, he seems nice. C stands for charming.
C for camaraderie. Like, yeah. That's so funny. Oh well, then maybe I stand corrected. But I don't know. I kind of felt like Bond figured him out, and then just doesn't ever. He mentions him once more at the end where he's like, "Oh, C's one of your disciples" or whatever, and even Blofeld doesn't seem to care about C. He's just like, "Oh yeah." Anyway,
totally blows his cover. Like, yeah.
I mean, whatever. And so it just sort of seems like maybe again, if because I know you mentioned at the top that Sam Mendes wanted to do more of a proactive Bond, and I think if you're going to do proactive Bond should be maybe acting on his intuition a bit more with the guy who's taking over MI6, and he doesn't seem to be as concerned about it as maybe he should be. And again, he doesn't even confront him in the end. It's all M. He's basically M's baddie for the movie, because I guess that was something people liked about Skyfall. So M gets more of a relationship with the villain. But I mean, I don't know. I on one side I'm like, maybe they should have played into the reveal more and pretended he was good. But then I'm also glad they didn't do that. But then it's like, maybe if you're not going to do that, cut most of his scenes. Just have it be a couple of little interactions with Bond constantly knowing this is going on in MI6 and I need to stop it. But again, they never really sort of come together. So,
well, and going back to the proactive thing, like if your goal is to have a proactive Bond, like I understand that, like sometimes he has to kind of like take the rules into his own hand and kind of like go off and go rogue, but like we've seen him go rogue for a lot of the films, and I know that's like a lot of the Craig films, and I know that's like a criticism of those films. I don't really think it's a criticism, it doesn't bother me, at least in this movie though. I'm like, if you're gonna try and be proactive and you're gonna try and follow this lead while knowing this guy in MI6 is bad, wouldn't your intuition tell you that they're linked, and wouldn't it tell you to clue like Mallory and everyone in on the situation before you go out and do this mission? Like, I know you just like caused mass destruction in Mexico or whatever, but like perhaps if you had let Mallory in on what was going on, it felt like you learned to trust this guy at the end of the last film, so play into that trust. Don't like play it close to the chest when there's really no need for you to, and especially after you've basically seen right through one of the antagonistic forces in the film.
I want to just give you one quick chance before I move on to Cam, though, Brody, because there must be something other than C that you want to highlight as a dislike that we can discuss.
You mentioned Hinks, and Hinks is definitely a highlight of the movie for me. I think part of the problem is with him that you kind of get an inkling that there's like personal motivation for Hinks. Like, he is a social climber, right? He's trying to work his way up the ranks. He kills the guy so he can get the mission because he wants to prove something. And yet we never really get him. Again, I think, and this is kind of a trend in all of the Sam Mendes Bond movies, but like we never really get any moments with the villains by themselves. We never really get like just a scene of the villains talking amongst themselves. And I think that comes to the detriment of Blofeld and Hinks here, where Hinks is kind of, there's like a promise of a really interesting idea, like, oh, this is a henchman who has like ambitions, and yet we never really get enough time with him. And granted, he doesn't speak, but you could convey these ambitions. I mean, they did convey these ambitions wordlessly, but we just never really get an idea of what he's trying to do. Like, I think it honestly would have made more sense, instead of having a cute Jaws moment where he gets thrown off the train, have him be who brings Bond and Madeline to Blofeld. They're going there anyway. Have him be the one that shows him up and is like, hey, look, I want to be rewarded for what I've done. Give me the promotion. And then Blofeld like dispatches him. He's like, that's not what we do here.
He's seen killing Spectre agents in the film. Maybe he should be like collecting the Spectre rings and have loads on his fingers, like jewelry.
Yeah, I kind of like it's kind of like was it you guys, either of you read comics? Like it's kind of like a Green Lantern thing with like when Green Lantern goes bad, he starts collecting all the rings. But I think I would have liked that.
Well, yeah, it would be giving him an extra dimension, which I don't think he has. But Cam, I'm going to throw it to you, and I think there is an elephant in the room that we haven't discussed in terms of dislikes. What do you have?
I'm going to just talk about like the mess of the story.
Sure.
Which is two primary things, and I'll start with the one that's maybe a little less the one we're going to talk about, but it's the everything is connected thing.
Yes.
Which is very much tied to, I think, honestly, the success of the Marvel franchise. You know, you had Avengers in 2012. This comes out in 2015, and that whole idea of like all these movies you watched, Silva seemed to have a personal mission. Oh, no. That was all just part of this grand operatic scheme that Blofeld was involved in. It just doesn't make sense. And I do love that Green is like really kicked to the curb.
Yeah.
Where it's like,
where's the sell for Green and Elvis?
Like Green.
Yes.
Poor Elvis.
I can totally understand Green. Green working for Spectre actually makes sense to me. But like they have a couple name mentions. There's no photo on the wall. There's no like grand acknowledgement of poor Dominic Green. Yeah. But all that sort of stuff, the way they kind of tie it together to what is something almost like a Saw movie at the end, when it's this like bombed out headquarters and like traps set up everywhere and ropes. And it's just like, holy smokes, this seems like it would take a lot of work. So building to that and kind of this retconning of the previous Craig era, it's the classic, they didn't plan it out. The same way when we watched Rise of Skywalker, it was like, oh, they didn't plan this trilogy out. You get that sense as well that they were kind of leaping on a trend and trying to retroactively make all of this make sense. I think they should have just left Silva off the table, because I think if you say Le Chiffre and Green, it kind of makes more sense.
Well, this is where I think my problem comes in, is I know that they wanted to have Spectre. I completely get that being the thing that brings Sam in. But you've spent 2 films, not Skyfall, but Quantum and Casino Royale, building this new entity that is Quantum. And you're building equity with your audience about this new organization that is not based in source material. You can do whatever you want with it. With a cinematic universe, it's yours to play with. And they just piss it up the wall and go, well, it was actually Spectre the whole time, kids. We just didn't have the rights to tell you yet. I just think, I don't know, I'd rather have had it been Quantum and actually see Quantum play out instead of just having this iconography back, which I get it. Blofeld has this storied history with James Bond. Spectre does. I get it. But you've spent all this time investing in this idea, this IP, this new thing, Quantum. You've not really defined it properly. This could have been the film you did that. You didn't. You just turned it into something else, and that feels like a waste.
Yeah. It's just like, I kind of understand what they're doing. In a way, they're kind of doing what Skyfall did, where it's ending in this very, like, kind of rundown, personal location that means something to the protagonist, but it just doesn't work this way. No. And the other mess, which ties right into this, is the Blofeld brother stuff, which... I'm trying to wrap my head around it, and that like this kid he grew up with for a brief period of time, who you have no indication from their back and forth that these two were ever relating to each other in any sort of social way.
No,
you don't even feel like you've like these two have ever met each other before, really, other than just saying things like, "I'm the author of all of your pain."
Great line.
It's a great line for a trailer. I'll give it that.
Yeah, it is. But it introduces this like destiny narrative that like Bond was destined to have this villain who would grow up the same time as him, become a criminal overlord who would oversee this grand Spectre organization that would somehow impact all of his professional life and lead to this one moment. And I'm like, whoa, this doesn't make sense to me. Like, I don't know anything about Child Blofeld. Like, what? Like, how did this kid get to where he is now? What was his story? Maybe in a movie where they had some flashbacks or something like that to establish exactly who he was. It just feels so weird. And it's the sort of thing I want to make sense of it. Every time I watch the movie, I'm like, okay, this will hopefully work for me this time. It still doesn't. And it just feels like at odds with a movie that's about MI6 taking on like global terrorism. It's so weird that the head figure, this shadowy figure, is someone who is like Bond's childhood, like, playmate.
it baffles me, the interconnectivity, and I just actually I want to hear from you guys. Brody, what do you have to say about it?
I honestly, I mean, I won't stand here and defend or sit here and defend the Blofeld thing. That just it is not the decision I would have made, and I've come to terms with it. I think, I can live with it, but I don't. It's just not a very intuitive kind of move. And yet at the same time, I think sometimes it gets a little overblown. Like, I know, and again, it's not hard to latch onto it because it is really, you're given so little of Blofeld in the film that when he sort of mentions that, it's like, oh, well, there you go. That must be his whole deal. And I feel like maybe it's more incidental. It's kind of like, it's more significant in that it links Bond to this shadow from his past, more so than it's like what drives both of these men. I know a lot of the time you see online people say that, oh, Blofeld was driven by he built Spectre to sort of get at Bond, and I don't think that's really what's going on there. I think it was he kind of comments on the way their lives kept, running into each other, but there was never a, I don't know if there was intent to go after Bond until you came into my life. I came into yours.
Long-term planning,
right? Yeah, and I at the same time, I agree. I think if we'd gotten a little more Blofeld sort of backstory prior to revealing that he was Bond's surrogate brother for 2 summers or whatever, 2 winters, maybe that would have. And I actually know in one of the leaked, so I've looked in some of these leaked sort of documents and whatever else, and I know at one point there was a line from Mr. White where he sort of explains where he met Blofeld and how they sort of started Spectre, and he talks about how they were both I forget what they were now. They both were part of some sort of mercenary organization, and they worked together and they went and fought in some foreign conflict, and Blofeld was kind of this scrawny little guy who you wouldn't expect to be there, but then when push came to shove and their backs were against the wall, he started just conniving and really figured out a way to survive. And he took Mr. White with him because Mr. White was physically capable of protecting him. And you got this, you got a much clearer picture of who Blofeld was and his history. I, for the life of me, don't know why. Well, actually, I think I do know why they cut it. Because he also mentions that all their squad mates died and they kind of ate them, which I'm thinking maybe was a little beyond the pale for some of the execs. They were because they didn't eat them alive, but they definitely, in a survival situation, ate some of their squad mates. And I think maybe that was part of it's a little too much. So they cut the whole backstory. But I think honestly, even if you cut that element of it, just getting a history for Blofeld would have made the fact that he is Bond's, childhood, someone he ran into in his childhood, would have felt less central to his character. He would have gave you more perspective on him. But I totally get why, when you watch the film, it's that's pretty much all there is to Blofeld. He is Bond's, pal. But yeah, and again, not the decision I would have made, but I've learned to live with it. I think it's just sort of an incidental sort of feature of those characters. And I like that it ties into Bond sort of having to move past this demon that has haunted him. But again, I really like his crafty saw. I like the comparison to Saw. I haven't made that connection before, but that's absolutely what it is.
He wanted to play a game.
God. I suppose my choice for dislike was going to be the Blofeld of it all, and I will just say you turn the C character from an uppercase C to a lowercase C and really diminish that role a little bit, and you give some of that screen time to Blofeld. I'm not saying make the film shorter, but just give him 5-10 more minutes to become more menacing. Have him do some bad things. Yeah. But then at the other way around though is historically the best Blofeld performances has been less is more. It's a guy behind some shades giving mysterious orders, and that's more scary than knowing more about Blofeld. So I don't know if that is necessarily the right thing. That's just my suggestion. So you guys have all tackled my dislikes, except for one, which we haven't mentioned, and I will mention because I have a strong dislike for the song, not the person, but the song. I think The Writing's on the Wall is the worst Bond song
Wow.
of all time, and I will put
I'm with you.
I will put it below Lani Hall's "Never Say Never Again."
Oh wow.
That is scathing. Hold the phone. I can't join you on that journey, Scott, but I stopped just short of Never Say Never Again. But I'm with you in terms of like quote unquote official Eon James Bond films. Writings on the Wall was my least favorite of any of them. It's the only one that I just wouldn't listen to.
No.
The other ones I will sit and play and listen to them over and over again. Writings on the Wall, whenever it pops up on my like Bond playlist, it's like, ugh, why am I listening to this?
Instant skip. It's gone.
I actually agree with you guys. I'm not a huge fan of that song. I like the melody.
Oh,
I'll be the only one defending.
That you will be. I know, and this is actually something we've sort of spot on a little bit. But like, I like I like the melody of it. I like the moodiness of it. I just don't think Sam Smith was the artist for the song. It clearly they're going for sort of a "we have all the time in the world" love song, right? Like the song is about Bond and Madeline. It's about these lovers, and yet it doesn't have the power that a song like that. Like it's not Louis Armstrong. It's not Adele. And I mean, Sam Smith is a fine performer, but I don't think their voice was suited to the song. I don't know. I mean, obviously everyone talks about the falsetto, but the falsetto is quite upsetting. It's not very listenable. Yeah.
I'm just gutted that the Radiohead song wasn't used. Any of them.
You see, I don't like that one either. I don't think that fits very well as a Bond song. I have nothing against Radiohead or that specific song, but as a Bond song, I think it's lousy.
Interesting.
There's one note. It is kind of like it hits its like Spectre, and then it just does that, and that's that's fair.
I love the instrumental of that Radiohead one. That is the only thing that like kind of irritates me about the about Writings on the Wall. I just think when you hear the Radiohead one, you're just like this fits the complete tone of the movie. Just like the very atmospheric, just like instrumentals and just like even like the one note of the chorus bit is in line with just kind of this general vibe of the film. Yeah.
So this is your defense of Writings on the Wall, huh? Just praising another song.
That Spectre is a better song. No,
that other artist was very good.
Very good.
that other Well, it's Radiohead. Wow. It's Tom York, and it's just like, what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Even if they just cracked out Man of War, I still would have been happy with it.
Yeah.
Who wouldn't be happy with that song? Okay, well, before we get to the knock list and we wrap this up, final notes. Anyone got any beating around? I had one sort of question for everyone, which is, we get the famous line. I don't think it appears in any of the trailers, but what does C stand for? I've made some jokes about it in the episode. The film goes with careless. Have you got any better suggestions?
Cam.
I mean, we're all thinking like cunt, right? Like
I mean, that is literally where like every British person watching that film goes to. That is my head instantly.
That's the joke. That's what like Daniel Craig is inferring.
You know what is so it's so weird, because I remember seeing that is. I'm so glad you brought this up, because I was actually going to circle back before we ended this segment, because it's palpable when you're watching it with an audience. Everyone bursts into laughter when it's like, well, now we know what C stands for. Everyone, it's like a brings down the house, and then immediately the oxygen is sucked out of the room, and he says careless, and it's like, shouldn't there have been a cut there? Shouldn't we have left this scene? Like, because it's just, I don't know. It honestly, it was palpable, and I like I like memeing on it. I guess I like joking about careless, but good lord, what were they thinking? Surely Sam Mendes knew. Like,
I'll defend that, because I think when Bond says, "I'm going to call you C," the whole audience knows exactly what Bond means by that. And I think the joke is that M is so square. He's like, now we know what C stands for. And the audience is like, yeah. And he's like, careless.
Fair enough.
Dork. Okay. Yeah. Like, I like that they're playing him as kind of like very square and, he's not Bond.
That's fair. Actually, no, you may have actually sold me on that moment. Wow. I like Spectre even more.
Yeah, how is that? Yeah.
Gents, Brody, Griffin, any final notes you want to chuck out before Cam chucks his out?
Here's what I'll say. This will be my I'll try and be brief about it. Defensive Writings on the Wall. The instrumental is beautiful. I think it is actually it's a very like, here's the problem with it. It sounds like a demo track, and you don't want your Bond like song to sound like a demo track. When you dive into like the way the song came about, it is very much a demo track. Sure. That being said, the instrumental is so seductive. It is about as haunting and alluring as the entire film. And I even think that like the way Sam Mendes sings it speaks to.
I think you get the wrong Sam.
Like the vulnerable.
Sam Mendes sings it.
Wow. No wonder it sounds so like falsetto.
Yeah, right. So,
he truly can't do anything.
Yeah, right. Anyways, I think the way that they sing that. I don't know. It kind of it speaks to the vulnerable side of Bond as a character, which I know was the intent with where they were going for. They wanted to show a more sensitive Bond and stuff like that. I think that they were kind of onto something with the lyrics too, in terms of just like talking about like the past, the ghosts, letting that die so that you can move on and not be bitter and fearful and resentful and everything, which I think for me is like the big core of the movie. Again, like I mentioned at the top, like the fact that you're not letting this specter haunt you, and I think the film does a good job of emulating that. And I really do like the title sequence, the tentacle stuff. Like that was just it was really well done. Yeah.
I could gush about this film. I don't want to give everyone the wrong impression. It is probably my least favorite Daniel Craig film, but I don't know. I think there's just something about going back to the beginning and sort of tying it together. The way the complete package presents me with this complete vision. And while, all the pieces aren't necessarily firing on all cylinders, the thing works. And when it really works, it's maybe some of my favorite stuff in the Craig era. And I think we didn't really touch on this very much, but I think it ties, at least the way they made No Time to Die sort of speak back to Spectre, makes this film make a lot more sense. You kind of get the sense that even though they didn't do part 1, part 2, this is like No Time to Die is the part 2 to Spectre. Again, a bold decision considering very few people like this film, but I kind of appreciate that these two films are one in a similar sense to Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace. Spectre and No Time to Die kind of complete each other, and while there are some shortcomings in Spectre, I think they tee up something quite nice in No Time to Die. So I can't be too mad at it, even when it's not maybe always working. But
right. Well, Cam, anything from you? Any final notes before we get to the knock list?
Just a couple things. So, just kind of tying back to the whole coincidence of everything going on with Blofeld. It's so appropriate that right at the start of the movie, they're like, "Oh, Bond, here's your private effects from the Skyfall," and there just happens to be a photo of Blofeld there, and it's just like, oh, okay. But I will say, when they bring that photo back later and we get a close-up, it's hilarious. Child Blofeld and Bond got a legitimate laugh out of me. I love it. Glorious. I want that on my wall. I need to find a print of that.
You should.
My wife saw that scene. She was walking through the living room when I was watching it. She goes, What year did this film come out? I was like, 2015. She goes, oh. That was a bad Photoshop job. I was like, wow.
Yeah, it's something. And also,
pinching those pennies at Sony.
Yeah.
I have a question for you guys. Can anyone please answer me the toxicology of the ring and how it reveals all the people that were in Spectre?
I actually can.
Okay, please.
Oh my God, go.
Of course.
There is I've thought about this movie more than any man ever should. And they really should have explained this maybe more in the movie, but there is in the ring the meteorite that he shows, like the one that they can touch. So there is a mineral that is found only in meteorites that is not radioactive, but it definitely leaves like has an afterlife that leaves some sort of trace in the human body when it is worn. And that is what's in the Spectre rings. And so when they did the autopsies on all of the Bond villains previously, they found this very rare kind of like toxin in their bodies, and it tied them to the ring because it's in the ring as well. So it's not that their fingerprints are on it or anything. It's that there is a mineral inside this ring that is so rare that it couldn't be a coincidence that they all have it in their system. Yeah.
I mean, I think we should all just stop and lightly clap at that. I mean, amazing.
Wow,
It's just, yeah.
The only hint to that is that on Q's screen you see that the you know, what do you call it, the periodic table kind of
spectrometer
number.
Showing
Yeah,
stuff,
you see that, and I just decided one day while I was watching it to Google it, and I was like, oh, this is actually a nice little detail. Like, they didn't bother to explain it all.
I think you're the only person.
I mean, there are a few Spectre experts, or spexperts, as I'm now going to call it.
I'm putting that on my resume.
You could do that, absolutely. But yeah, that's blown me away. That's blown me away.
They probably should have emphasized that that's what was going on, because it's very confusing.
Probably. Q probably should have had a single line about it. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
They were too busy showing, like, South Africa being bombed on CNN, which they also didn't bother to show us. They just sort of had it on the TV in the background. Major plot point, but it's like, whatever.
Well, I think it's time we answer the question that we tackle every week. Knock list time. Is Spectre making the list of the greatest spy films of all time? That is a toughie. Just, gents, some of the films that have made it on in the past, for Bond ones, for instance, would be Casino Royale, would be Goldfinger, would be Thunderball, would be On Her Majesty's Secret Service, but lots of other spy films too, 3 Days of the Condor, things like that. Great films. Quantum didn't make it. I believe Skyfall made it, Cam? Yep. So Craig is 2 out of 3 so far. We have 4 votes. I'm going to go with Griffin first. Griffin, yes or no, do you think Spectre should be on the list of the greatest spy films of all time?
Well, I mean, if Thunderball made the list, then clearly, Spectre should be on the list.
I was outvoted on that one, I have to say, but yeah.
He was outvoted on Thunderball. I was outvoted on You Only Live Twice.
Oh, that's brutal. That is brutal. Yeah. Man, I'm strangely conflicted because if my initial reaction is to say absolutely not, because it is a very broken movie, but there is, I don't know, like, can you have, here's my defense of it. Here's why I say yes, and I'm going to say yes, maybe the only voice on the panel to say yes, but because of this movie, if we did not get this movie and it did not have the issues that it had, it would not have challenged them to make what they did with No Time to Die, which I do think is one of the best Bond films of all time. So for all the faults that this movie has, and my God, there are many, what it led to was worth it. And I think when you watch both of those films back to back, they do kind of have this like great symbiotic relationship with one another. And again, No Time to Die makes Spectre better. And so like as that is like the final chapter of the Craig era, I don't know, it works for me. So that's going to be my rationalization there. I'm totally cool being the only voice on here that feels the same or feels that way. So
hey, it's all to play for. That's one yes. It could be a sweep. It could, you don't know. Brody.
Yeah, you've put me in an awkward position here, Griffin, because I was just going to do like a vanity vote and say yes because I figured I'd be the only one. And I was like, yeah, I'll give it, because I think it does.
Well, this is why I did it. I wanted to challenge you. I wanted to challenge you to really think about this.
I mean, I know that's based on an assumption of how you guys are going to vote, but I don't know. It's tough because I think Spectre does something that a lot of spy films. Something I love about the spy genre is that sense of atmosphere, that sense of foreboding, grim, kind of morose, that vibe. And I think Spectre does that really well. So if I'm judging it as a spy film, I think Spectre it's not in terms of a plot the best spy plot, but I think in terms of in terms of atmosphere and tone and the vibe I want from a spy film, Spectre does it better than a lot. Even a lot of other Bond films that I would prefer, on a more holistic sense. So yeah, I don't know. And there's also very few films that I think I can get what I get from Spectre, from. So Yeah, I think for that reason and that reason alone, and this might end up causing a split vote here, but I'm going to say yes, but it's a hedged yes. It's me saying yes, but not for the plot, for the atmosphere.
Okay. Well, I mean, just for the listeners, it's very rare that we have a split vote, but the ruling is, and this is, I call this the Bourne ultimatum rule. If it's a split vote, it's a no, because we can't have a consensus on the matter. That's the best way to do it.
Yeah.
But as it stands, it's 2 yeses. Really, this hinges on Cam now, because I always go last. So Cam, all eyes are on you, sir.
Well,
Spectre?
no. Why don't you answer if you're an obvious one?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Fine. All right. Cam wants to build some mystery here. I like that. All right. He likes the vibe.
How Spectre?
Yeah. It's a no. This list that we're crafting, I know what is on it, and the benchmark it needs to pass is a very intrinsic thing to me. And if Quantum didn't pass it, then there's no way Spectre is passing it.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I think it's very easy like that.
Yeah, for me, it's a no for me as well. Spectre, it's just like if I'm looking at the Craig era, it ranks pretty much at the bottom.
Yeah.
I think I've found more appreciation with Quantum over the years, and Spectre hasn't kind of pulled me up that extra bit. I haven't fallen in love with it. I just think it's way too messy. And it just feels like it's several script drafts away from actually working. And I like a lot of what it's doing. There's some scenes in here that belong. Look, there's going to be highlight reels many years down the road, decades to come, of Bond greatest hits moments. And there's going to be legit great moments from Spectre to work into those YouTube reels and what have you. But as an overall movie, I just can't put it up there with the best of Bond.
That's totally fair.
I mean, well, we've totally run out of creativity, and we're doing stuff like the greatest pre-title sequences of all time. Because we've run out of spy films to talk about. You can bet that Spectre will be discussed, I think, but I don't know if I could. If Cam had said yes, I think I may have just quit the podcast and asked Brody and Griffin to take my place as a host.
When we do our best meeting scenes, then Spectre is going to be very well represented.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
Yeah. That's corporate hierarchy, Spectre, right there. I know that's fair.
Best use of meteorites in a spy movie.
You would. I would have felt completely guilty if it had have ended up on the list. I'll be perfectly honest. I think I voted my conscience on this, but yeah, it probably didn't belong on a greatest of all time list. It's a movie I appreciate.
Oh, absolutely.
But again, yeah. So I'm really glad this.
I don't think Griffin agrees with you there.
This panned out the way it. Wait, wow! Griffin's going to bat for it more than me.
Oh no! So here's my secret plan. I wanted to see if we could actually get it. I wanted to make Brody think about this, because I knew you guys were not going to vote it. Honestly, if I had just gone right off the cuff, I would have said no, absolutely not. Because it's at the bottom. It's like towards the bottom of my Bond ranking, even though
it's towards the middle.
Like it,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm glad that we could get the Spexperts, which is on the show. I'm glad we chose well for guests. I'm glad that you guys brought the enthusiasm for Spectre and gave a different perspective than what Cam and I did, although we came at it from different angles too, to be fair. And there's a lot to love in this film, but 2 yeses and 2 nos. We're invoking the Bourne ultimatum rule, and as such, Spectre is not making the knock list. The dossier on the film is complete and filed as classified. Brody, Griffin, I want to thank you both for taking the time to come and speak with us today. It's been a gargantuan film to talk about, and you've been absolute stars. Where can people find you both online? Brody first.
Yeah, I'm pretty simple. You can follow. Twitter's pretty much the only social media I use. You can follow me at Brody Serravalli. I'm sure the spelling for that will be in the description.
It will be in the links below.
Yeah, there you go. Because I that's pretty much where I spurred off my random opinions.
Your Spexpertise.
Not just about Bond or Spectre. My Spexpertise. I should just retheme the entire Twitter around Spectre, honestly. I'm
surprised you haven't.
That's a real good niche, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. And Griffin, what about you?
Yeah, so you can check out the FilmSpeak YouTube channel where we do video essays basically every week on just like, various films, Marvel, DC, Top Gun, indie, just movies in general. If you like analysis and weird takes on stuff, you can head on over to the FilmSpeak channel, check that out. And then if you want to follow me specifically, you can follow me on Twitter at Schiller.
And whenever we have someone who does like a show or a podcast on, one thing I like to ask is what's a good entry point for our listeners to come aboard and check out your stuff. I mean, I would have said one of your sort of the Quantum of Solace or the Tomorrow Never Dies or the Moonraker videos, really. But where would you recommend they go?
Yeah. I would totally agree. Especially if you're listening to this podcast. Obviously, you have an interest in Bond and spy fiction. So absolutely, if you want to see probably like the definitive or one of the definitive like video essay defenses of Quantum of Solace, we gave that thing everything we got. So you could go check that out. And that was like the first Bond video essay that we did. So that kind of like kickstarted them all. And then if you want to listen to a more conventional opinion, you can check out our big one on Casino Royale.
Perfect. Well, gents, it's been a pleasure. Thank you once again for coming on the show.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us.
Well, there you go, Cam. That was our chat about Spectre. Brody, Griffin, I want to thank you both for taking the time to speak with us today. But the question goes to you, Mr. Smith. What are we talking about next week?
Yes, we have some big interviews to wrap up Spectre. First of all, we're going to talk to Gary Powell, the fight coordinator on the Daniel Craig Bond era, and also some other very notable spy films we'll dive into in that interview. And Scott, I believe we also have another big one.
Yes, and also joining us on the Friday next week, it is Miss Jenny Tamim, who designed all the costumes for this film and Skyfall, plus a bunch of other films, including some of the Harry Potters. So, and the most recent Game of Thrones prequel show, House of the Dragon. So look out for that in your podcast feeds. And if you like what you heard on the show this week, please consider leaving us a 5-star review wherever you're listening. And do not forget to follow us discreetly on social media at SpyHards, that's SpyHards on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. But until next week, listeners, I'm off to interrogate a mouse.